Has anybody heard from Pat?
I believe it's coming, but we should get started at 5 o'clock.
All right. All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. A pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have any residents who want to address the board? All right. All right, tonight we are going to get a elementary science pilot overview by Dr. Dandridge and Jason. Oh, and somebody
Thank you
else.
very much, Ms. Johnson. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll
Great.
do introductions here in a moment. So as the board is aware, we have been piloting a couple elementary programs, science programs this past year. The state has made a pretty significant overhaul and change to the science standards, which need to be adopted, will be adopted for next year. We need to update our lessons and curriculum to align to those new standards. So we've been piloting some programs that allow us to do that. And today we're here to share some of the information. Just want to introduce Aaron Buckwalter is our elementary science department coordinator. And Jason Hoffman, they have been doing a tremendous job going out and learning about the new steel standards. As you'll see throughout tonight's presentation, they are fairly complex and a fairly large overhaul of what we had previously. So they're to be commended on the tremendous amount of work that they have been putting in to really understand these new standards and prepare the district for this adoption. You all have the presentation in front of you, and yes, Ms. Johnson, you have sticky notes as well. And we've tried it before and it's worked well. So many of the questions that you might have as you're going through this presentation might be answered a little bit later. So we'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind just writing notes down on the stickies. We will answer as many questions as you have on all of them, but that'll help us move through the presentation if we can try that format again. All right, so just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to set the stage a little bit to talk about elementary curriculum. We'll really dig into steel standards, what they are, what some of the changes are about. Then we'll talk about the pilot, the selection process of programs, construction of the pilot, etc. It is a little different than pilots we've had in the past. We have some surveys and feedback from students and staff, which we'll be sharing, some pros and cons, costs, recommendations, and next steps. All right, so just a note on the front end. I know the past several years, Jason and I have been coming to you with some fairly significant costs towards the elementary curriculum. And in our 6-year cycle, largely that's because the past couple of years are more significant subjects, math, ELA, and science, which are the 3 tested subject areas with the PSSAs, and our more complex subjects are up in the curriculum cycle for review. So we've had 3 back-to-back years with some significant costs with programs that we've been bringing forward. As we project forward and look at the next 3 years, we do not have subject areas that are going to have the same level of financial impact when we're talking about rewriting curriculum or adjusting programs. So we do anticipate a much lower impact to the budget for 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29. It would likely not be until we come back around in 29, 30 to reviewing the math curriculum again, that it would be again, larger impact or cost. So just wanted to give you some perspective. I know Jason and Kathy at the secondary work really hard at strategically laying out those curriculums so that there is spacing and so that we're not incurring all the costs in the same year, but just wanted to help you understand why the past 3 have been a little bit higher. The STEEL standards, as I mentioned, and STEELS is an acronym. You're going to learn all about it in just a moment and what that stands for. Just a reminder, this is not an elective area. This is a required subject. The state has changed the standards. So school districts have till next year to align their curriculum to these new STEEL standards. A couple differences at the state level and some quick overviews of the changes to the standards. In previous years, these standards were written in bands. So previously, the K-4 band was all tested at the end of the fourth grade year. And the PSSA was tested in grade 4. And then there was a grade 5 to 8 band where you had to cover your content throughout those years. The new STEEL standards now have grade specific standards in K through 5. So kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, each have specific standards to meet. There is still a middle school band, that 6 to 8 band, and our sixth grade teachers have been meeting and working with our middle school science teachers on how they're going to address those standards over the course of those 3 years. The other big change from the state, and that happened this year, is that the science PSSA test moved from fourth grade to fifth grade. So now we are going to be testing at fifth grade, eighth grade, and then the biology keystone. So those are some of the big changes for the STEEL standards in general.
So some of this might sound a little familiar. I was here in the fall to talk about STEELs a little bit and provide an overview. So if some of this sounds familiar, that might be the meaning it's from. But STEEL standards, you can see up there, stand for science, tech and engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability. So just looking at each column there, the science piece, not much has changed there as far as like the broad content subjects covered from K to 8th grade or K to 6th grade. And that's life science, physical science, earth and space. The tech and engineering side as well. The standards there look for the interactions between tech and engineering. And a lot of those are covered in tech ed classes and STEM projects that are integrated into the curriculum lessons and things of that nature. And then lastly, the environmental literacy and sustainability portion. That is where we've seen the biggest PA specific standards to what they would like to see classrooms cover for issues that face Pennsylvanians specifically. So that's where you might see some revolving around agriculture or pest management or things of that nature. And that's why Pennsylvania took borrowed a lot of standard language from Next Generation Science Standards or NGSS. And then they came up with their specific PA STEEL standards that they felt hit the issues we face in Pennsylvania. So in the traditional science model, and these were the standards that were enacted in 2002, they were under the premise that you, the teacher, would be presenting all the content up front, the vocabulary, the definitions, the concepts to the students, and then students would be given that information, recite it back to the teacher in some manner, and then near the end of the unit, you would be doing a cumulative lab, or you would have going step by step through that process. And it was a very rigid teacher-driven experience. And what these standards really strive to do is to flip that in a way and go from teacher-driven to student-driven. Now, it doesn't mean the teacher's taken out of it. It just means that students are presented a phenomena, which Jason will talk more about here in a moment, like a real world situation that occurs. And then students will ask questions at the beginning and the teacher will guide the classroom discourse at the beginning to really get students thinking and really driving the inquiry-based model of science where the students are asking the questions up front. And then throughout the course of the unit or lessons, they're discovering that information ideally for themselves with you, the teacher, guiding them along the way. So as we present the two piloted curriculums, we felt that they hit that concept really, really well because that can be a really tricky thing to do in an elementary classroom, to have students discovering this information while you, the teacher, are guiding that process and keeping it on track. So the new standards, again, look to incorporate 3 different aspects into each standard. So you have, they love acronyms, SEP, science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. So the SCP, so every standard will have these three things present. And they even color coordinated them for us, which we elementary teachers appreciate. And you can see how they form together to form each standard. So the SEP side of things is what students will be doing. So there's a large list of the actual behaviors or activities that students will be doing to achieve that standard, but just a couple of them that I noted were just simply asking questions, developing models, constructing explanations, behaviors that students demonstrate every day. That's something that they wanted to have present in each of the STEEL standards. Then the cross-cutting concepts. This is more how students approach their thinking in order to achieve that standard. So that might look like identifying patterns as they go throughout the lessons, or it could be a cause and effect cross-cutting concept, or it could be they're developing a model to replicate the structure and function of what if you're in life science and talking about cells. So that's the cross-cutting concepts. And then the last piece is the disciplinary core ideas. And this is really the content that you want to have the students learn in your specific given area. So whether you're in life science and learning about ecosystems, or in earth and space science and learning about earth systems, or in physical science learning about chemical reactions, that is the specific content by the end of the unit or lesson that the students should be demonstrating that they know and can present that to you. So the last piece here that I mentioned is that these are performance standards, which is different than the 2002 standards, which was very rote and was very, do you know this definition or not? This is where students are actually demonstrating and proving to you that they can piece together, they can take data and they can piece together situations to prove the standard is known and to prove that they have gained an understanding of it. So as I mentioned, all the standards are three-dimensional. They have those three pieces to them: the disciplinary core ideas, science practices, and cross-cutting conceps. Jason's going to have a slide coming up here that shows you that and what it looks like, and how those three pieces are present in every standard.
Great. The STEELs really focus on the use of phenomena. So with phenomena-driven instruction, the students are presented with a photograph, with a video, some sort of event that they can then investigate. And really the idea behind that is that the students are coming up with questions and really just asking, how did this happen, or why does it happen? And what this helps develop is their critical thinking skills and their problem-solving skills, which in the end is what we want them to be able to do. On the next slide, there's some examples of what some of those phenomena might be. It honestly can be as simple as a spider web. How does the spider form its web? Or in this picture, how do those droplets of dew stay on the web? How do they form there? Where did that hole in the road come from? Why are the clouds stacked like pancakes above that mountain? Why is that geyser frozen? Why is the lake multiple different colors? So just things that kids are presented with that they can then ask questions from. With the pilot programs that we did, some of the questions that they would be tasked with was, why is the Statue of Liberty green? That's not the original color of the Statue of Liberty, so why is it green today? How do windmills turn wind into energy? Why do species ebb and flow within Yellowstone's ecosystem? As one species goes up, another species goes down. Why does that occur? So just all of these phenomena that are actual natural events that they seek to then ask questions about, and through the course of the unit try to figure out the answers to. On the next slide, this was, as we've gone through trainings at the IU, this was a quote that really stuck out to us, really kind of capturing the essence of what these standards are all about. And it says, when students are always told what the relationships are, they are borrowing the sense or the meaning that someone else has made. And consequently, their learning is both fragile and temporary. And so our goal is to turn their learning from fragile and temporary into something that's very stable and very strong. And you do that by having them construct the knowledge on their own. On the next slide, you'll see an example of what one standard looks like. This is a 4th grade standard. Each grade level has between 15 and 20 of these. So Mr. Buckwater was talking about the complexity of these standards. This is why. So every grade level has 15 to 20 of these pages, and then take that K to 6, 7 different grade levels. That's a lot of stuff. Within each of these, you can see there are multiple pieces involved. At the top, it gives you the grade level, gives you some of the background information. Those 3 colored boxes really talk about the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts that Mr. Buckwater discussed. So those are paired there for each standard. You can see this science and engineering practice is based upon constructing an argument. So students are not just with this standard where we're talking about the parts of plants and animals that work together. We're not just talking about them identifying the leaves and the roots of a plant. We're talking about them constructing an argument for why those parts of a plant are important to its survival. The disciplinary core idea is the content. It's the science stuff that we've always been responsible for. So plants and animals have internal and external structures that help them grow and survive. And then this cross-cutting concept is all about systems, that a plant, an animal, there are lots of different things happening inside that species that allow it to continue to survive. They're all working together as a system. You'll see some Pennsylvania context lines. That's where things like that pest management, agriculture, things as Mr. Buckwater was talking about that were specific to Pennsylvania would be mentioned. It also shows links to the career ready skills, to ELA standards, to math standards. So all of this integration, which we're responsible for showing kids how things are connected together, that's all defined in each and every one of these standards. So it's a very complex set of STEEL standards that have been created, but they do a nice job of making sure that kids are understanding why things are happening and not just learning a set of isolated facts.
So one of the questions that is natural here is, could we write our own program or curriculum versus going out and purchasing one? Which I think is a valid question to ask. There are some of our neighboring districts that are attempting this right now. We have been talking to them and have received quotes from some of them about how that is going in their district. And we've heard things such as it's ineffective, unorganized, short-sighted. And the reasons behind some of that is because this is not just a minor adjustment. As Jason and Aaron were talking about here, these are complex standards. The phenomena themselves are not defined in the standard, so you have to come up with them. And when we have some districts that are telling us that their grade levels are writing curriculum, they're finding a lot of overlap between what's written in first grade and second grade and third grade, et cetera. Not only that, those are just some of the surface items there. Science is, in its nature, a very supply-driven content area because of the labs. If we were not to purchase a program and where you have kits that come along with the content and the workbooks and consumables, we would have to purchase those separately. If we were to cost that out, just rough numbers of the K to 6 over 6 years, approximately $20,000 per grade level per year. You're talking $840,000 just in supplies, not even counting the curriculum writing to try and attempt to come up with something half as good as the programs that we're evaluating. So when you keep that in mind, we really felt that looking at a program was a no-brainer, made the most sense as to how we should proceed in order to provide our students and staff with the best science opportunities going into next year.
So we actually started this process about 3 years ago. I don't exactly know what it was, but Kathy and I came to you and said, STEELs are on the horizon. They haven't been approved, but they're coming. And at that point, I gathered together a group of elementary teachers and we started looking at programs. So we took a look at programs from Savas, from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, from McGraw-Hill, PhD, which we knew was a science program for an ELA program, Wit and Wisdom, that we were at that point going to be piloting the next year. We took a look at Amplify Science. And we just thought, okay, like these are coming, we have to take a look and see what's out there. As we did that, we found that several of those from the big publishers, Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, Savas, they were basically like our old textbooks that we had in science, just repackaged and made changes to the content. So the content was aligned, but this process that we're talking about wasn't really there. We still had kind of those step-by-step investigations that happen more towards the end of the unit when the instruction had already taken place. And so we kind of crossed those off because that's not what the nature of these standards are. We then looked at Amplify. Amplify Science is aligned content-wise, it is aligned process-wise. When we looked at that, Amplify, you could literally teach that program 3 hours a day. And so when we looked at our time for science and what our teachers were able to deliver, like, well, this is a phenomenal program, but we can't do this. We don't have the time in our schedules to be able to pull this off. So those were 4 of the 5 that we kind of eliminated right at first. We took a look at PhD. PhD had the content alignment, seemed to have the process alignment we were looking for, and so we kept that in our back pockets. But we knew that was only one program, and the Steels still weren't officially out yet. So the following year, the IU started offering Steels Institutes. So we had groups of teachers and administrators attend those training sessions. At those sessions, they had publishers come in and show their products, had samples there for us to take a look at. And that's where I got some other ideas. Some of the other programs we looked at, one was Mystery Science. During the pandemic, Mystery Science had started to make some of its materials available for free online. Some of our teachers had been using them, they liked them. Unfortunately, we looked at the paid program and honestly had the opposite problem as Amplify did, is that it wasn't enough. We were looking at that and realizing that there wasn't enough content there to make sure all students were meeting those standards. We looked at FOSS. FOSS was a program Mr. Buckwalter had used in his previous district. I had implemented in my previous district. Mrs. Eshelman shaking her head. Like, FOSS kits are kind of, something that elementary science had been in the past. When we looked at them, though, their new kits were their old kits. They hadn't really changed them other than adjusting sometimes what grades they were taught in because the content had changed. The process alignment wasn't there. We found 2 others, Twig and OpenSciEd, and then actually a third, Smithsonian Science as well. The one thing we really liked about Twig is it was a K-8 program. Most of these programs were either middle school programs that were fully developed 6 to 8, or K-5 programs that weren't developed in 6 to 8. And we wanted something K-6. So we looked at Twig, looked at its alignment, content-wise, process-wise, seemed to match. PhD was only available K-5, so that gave us kind of 2 programs. We wanted something else to look at for 6th grade. The Smithsonian Science was only available K-5. OpenSciEd was available in grades 6 through 8. And when we looked at it, we included that as part of the materials we looked at for the pilot. When we had teachers volunteer for piloting, when they looked at OpenSciEd versus Twig, they realized that OpenSciEd did not have nearly the level of sophistication that we wanted and needed. And so we did not have any teachers end up piloting that. So while these were 3 programs that we brought to teachers for pilot consideration, the 2 that we ended up using for the pilot were Twig and PhD Science. The next slide kind of shows you the pilot breakdown here. We had 27 teachers involved in the pilot. They were all volunteers. We had 11 teachers in PhD and 16 in Twig. Remember, Twig was the only program that had a 6th grade component. So 4 of those teachers were 6th grade teachers, meaning that we did have a fairly equal breakdown in K-5 between PhD and Twig. 863 students were involved in the pilot. Because some of our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers departmentalized for science, some of our pilot teachers ended up teaching their unit to 2 or 3 classes. So we did get a large representation of students in the pilot. As Dr. Dandridge said, this pilot was a little bit different than what we did for ELA and math, and that the teachers only taught 1 unit. That was for a variety of reasons. First, we were coming off of a 2-year ELA pilot where many of our teachers were involved in that. However, we also knew that a lot of the staff who had expressed an interest in piloting science had not piloted Wit and Wisdom, meaning if we had started this in September, they would have been beginning a new science program and a new ELA program at the same time. And that was just not a reasonable ask for them. The other piece is because the science programs involve lots of supplies. That was going to become a costly pilot for us. The companies were willing to allow us to pilot one unit if we paid for the training and give us the supplies we needed. If we did more than one unit, we were going to have to pay for that. So we elected to do one unit starting in January. That worked out time-wise based upon our other considerations and also worked out based upon what we were able to utilize from the companies. By doing that one unit, we were very much able to gain a good read on what those units were going to look like and what those companies' products were going to look like across that grade level. In January, the teachers who volunteered to pilot all had professional development and a chance to collaborate with teachers within their grade level. And then we also had support from both companies throughout the pilot process. They were here on site in classrooms and were also available to answer any questions that our teachers had.
So we did survey students and staff, as I said, to get some feedback on the unit that they piloted. Similar to what we did in previous pilots, we only surveyed our intermediate students in grades 4 through 6, but we had about close to 300 students respond to the survey. Some things to pull out of the graphs that you see in front of you is one, in all of the programs, the content was interesting and engaging. You can see all 3 of those constructions up there were greater than 86%. I know the numbers are a little hard to read, but they are in front of you as well. I have Twig grade 6 broken out on its own there because, like I said, there was no PhD in grade 6. So you have that as its own standout, and then Twig in grades 5 and PhD grades 4 and 5, what those results look like. And then in terms of some of the whether it challenged their thinking, slight preference there on the PhD pilots for challenging thinking, making them think deeply about science, as well as in the bottom right, learning more about science, slight improvement there or a preference on the PhD program. But in the bottom left, you can see Twig was the stronger in terms of students reporting that the units, they felt more engaged in the units as they looked at them. Regardless, I think pretty strong results on all of the graphs for all of the programs in terms of our students responding to the content and enjoying it more than some of the traditional science programs that they've seen in the past. We also, on the next slide, asked them whether or not they'd recommend this unit for future Hempfield students. And again, overwhelmingly, they said yes, with PhD grades 4 and 5 being the strongest yes there. 93% of the students there would recommend it. The biggest differences that they reported out in some of the open-ended questions were having more hands-on and experiments with these programs. It was a different style of learning for them, and it was more engaging than they've seen in the past. We also surveyed teachers, and I apologize in advance. I realized 5 minutes before this evening that I have a typo on this slide. The bottom 2 graphs both are labeled exactly the same. So the one in the bottom left should say that materials provide strategies and supports for students in special populations to support their regular and active participation in learning. So that was on me. I apologize for that typo. The data is accurate, though. You'll see pretty consistently that Twig was only piloted in kindergarten, 1st, and 6th grade. That's why it's broken out differently for the teachers. 100% there of the staff who were using Twig in those grade levels really felt strongly about the program. So the labs and activities are engaging students. The materials provided extension opportunities to engage students. So good accessibility for different reading levels, etc. You see some mix there in the grades 2 through 5 for both Twig and PhD. Most of those are agree or somewhat agree that their program provided those supports for students or were engaging. But they only got to try this for a unit. They really didn't dig in to the entire program as they have in some of our previous pilots. which is why I think you see a little bit of the mixed results there. Overall, though, on the next slide, when we did ask them, would you recommend your pilot for implementation at Hempfield? Again, K1 and 6, who only had Twig, 100% of them recommended Twig and felt strong about that program. For grades 2 through 5, Twig, about 75% said that they would use either or recommend Twig, where in PhD, about 84% would recommend either or would recommend PhD. So not too many dissenters in that limited pilot that we provided for our set.
So some of the more open-ended questions that were asked to teachers, here's kind of a little summary of some of the pros and cons that were mentioned by them. So just highlighting a couple things on the cons side first. Teachers noted that the formative assessments were present, but if these were to be implemented, we would need some summer hours to figure out what we as a district would want to use as formative assessments. And formative assessments in this case would be the small checks you do as a teacher throughout. In the grade book, they would go in as learning process grades. And it's not that, again, they weren't there. It's that teachers were unsure, okay, if we implement this next year, how am I going to put this in the grade book? And those are deeper conversations we would need to have over the year, over the summer during curriculum writing hours. And then another thing is time for lessons was always the thing coming up. That was coming up at the IU13 sessions district-wide. There's a big emphasis on ELA. There's a big emphasis on math. We only have this for science, this block of time. That's all we're given. So already Jason's done a great job with talking to principals and figuring out if we can have flexibility in some situations, and those conversations will have to continue over the summer. Yeah, that's just some of the things on the con side. And then the pro side, this excited me as a teacher myself in 6th grade, is that students were engaged in the activities. I think in science, that's the #1 thing. It's full of discovery, it's full of creativity, and I'm excited to see that come out of all these programs. And another thing I'm excited to see is that students are applying and creating their own meaning. It's not that they're interpreting, I'm going to define this term this way, but they're creating it as they go, and it's not teacher driven, which is exactly what we wanted to see in order to hit what the new standards want us to achieve within our district.
So essentially, we have felt throughout this process that we have 2 strong programs. We felt really good about our Twig implementation. We felt really good about the PhD. We were getting good feedback from both the students and the staff. So one of the major influences in a recommendation is also about costs, right? So we know that PhD is not offered in grade 6. So Twig is really the option that we feel needs to be implemented in grade 6. So you'll see that on all 3 of these options, but there were a couple different ways that we could also construct our science programs for next year. The first one was to simply adopt Twig K to 6. We felt good about the materials. However, that also does come in as the most expensive option. I know you've been seeing on our budget slides that we had projected 1.8 million with some work that Jason's been doing with the company. We were able to get that down to about 1.7. We also, as we were evaluating budgets this year, because at the beginning of the year, we still had some ESSER dollars left over. We were allowed to spend those up until September 30th. We were able to identify some supplies and materials in the curriculum budget that would qualify for ESSER spending that Jason had originally budgeted for. So we were able to free up some dollars. That means we have some left over at the end of this year, which would allow us to purchase some of these materials ahead of time. We can save, we have projected about $265,000 out of this year's curriculum budget. In all 3 of these options would be budget year 24-25 money, not impacting next year. So if we take that first option, which I said is the most expensive, at about 1.7, take out that 265,000, that leaves us at 1.4 and change in terms of an impact to next year's budget, and this is a 6-year program as the others have been. That is our most expensive, and at this point is our least preferred option. Option 2, we can implement PhD in K-5 and then use Twig in grade 6. That is our most cost-effective option. So that comes in a price tag of just under 1.4 million. Again, using that same 265,000 out of this year's money, that would reduce the impact to next year's budget to 1.1, about 1.1 million. Now, K-1, as you saw on the charts, does prefer Twig. So this wouldn't be their absolute preference in terms of materials they'd like to see. But as we went back and talked to them and they reviewed some of the PhD materials, they did feel good about those materials and felt that they could adopt them as well. The other option, option 3 here, is kind of the, I guess we call it the teacher preference option here, right? So in this option, we would have Twig in K1 and 6 and PhD in grades 2 to 5. That gives us a little bit of a cost saving to option 1, not a ton, but a little bit, bring it down closer to 1.6. That with this year's money would be 1.364 impact on next year's budget. That is most preferred by teachers based on their feedback. There are some issues there with continuity, moving from Twig in K-1 and then going to PhD in 2 to 5 and then back to Twig in grade 6. There would be some redundancies in terms of some content that they saw in earlier grades being repeated when they moved to a different program. We would have to iron out some of those in order to move forward with that option. So those are the 3 options that we costed out. And as we evaluate the options, our recommendation is option 2. We felt that creates the cohesive experience between K to 5. We would have PhD from our kindergarten students all the way up until that 5th grade PSSA test, culminating with that test in 5th grade. Like I said previously, while it wasn't preferred in grades K and 1, they did feel good about PhD and felt that was an option that they could implement. It does match teacher and student feedback, and it is the most cost-effective option of the 3. We know how important budget conversations are right now, and that option saves us about $250,000 over the 3rd option. So that is our recommendation this evening.
All right, so the next steps, the materials have been on review. So they are over there on the stage. I will add to that tonight the textbook adoption forms for Twig grade 6 and PhD K to 5. Those will be over there until May 27th. At the Finance Committee meeting on May 27th, we'll ask you to vote on our recommendation tonight. As Dr. Dandridge mentioned, if approved, I'll be able to purchase the 6th grade Twig materials with this year's money. So I will get those ordered as soon as I have that vote on the 27th in support of our recommendation, if you do choose to vote that way. I've been in touch with Twig. They guarantee me that those materials will get here by the end of June and we'll be able to pay for them and have them in this year's budgeted money. After July 1, then I'd be able to order the K to 5 materials. And then we would get summer professional development scheduled with both companies. They know that May 27th is the voting day. So as soon as that vote goes through, I would be able to contact them if it's a yes on the 28th and get that PD set up. That would be the summer training as we've done in the past. Teachers who choose not to attend the summer training, we do have sessions also would be set up for them in August when we first come back to school. For the teachers who do choose to attend the summer training and get their alternate in-service credit then, they would have collaboration time before school starts with their grade level teams. And then we also have other times built into the September in-service day and our October 31st early dismissal day, which would also be devoted to additional professional development opportunities for them. So those would be the next steps.
You guys were wonderful. Thank you so much for utilizing the sticky notes. What questions have you written down or are rolling around after all of that information?
I have a suggestion. If we talk about the curriculum and then talk about the dollars separately. So that
However you like.
we can kind of finish one part and then go to the next part, like you did in the presentation, actually.
Mhm.
Questions? No questions?
There's questions.
No, okay. I'm sure there's some, but within the content and the recommendations.
My only concern was that that phenomena kind of thing would still happen in sixth grade, moving to a different. And I know you explained that that's more of a middle school band, so it
Mhm.
looks a bit different than elementary. Would that be where that kind of higher level thinking comes from, or your experience with it?
Yeah, it's continues in sixth grade. Actually, the middle school teachers in seventh and eighth grade and the high school teachers are also writing their curriculum using that same process, that everything is based upon a phenomenon. So Mrs. Dicely and Mrs. Miller at the high school level are continuing that work. So it does continue in sixth grade, Twig.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I'm going to start with this one. I understand you looked at some other programs. One of them was Savas. Did that meet the requirements of the Steele standards?
No. It meets the content requirements, so the content is there in the grades it belongs. But when you look at the phenomena-based, the inquiry-based instruction, it did not.
So no one could adopt that program, just to be clear, could adopt Savas as a program in their district and meet these requirements.
The
Is that
way-
what you're suggesting?
the
I
way
just
that
want to
this-
be sure I
The
understand.
way that the standards are written in terms of
Yeah.
things needing to be inquiry-based and all coming from student inquiry, it would be very difficult to meet the standards using only that program. You would need to do things differently than what the program suggests.
So you might need to tweak the program a little bit, but you would still have a core program.
Correct. The core program is basically a textbook that we think about
Mm-hmm.
a science textbook with content that kids are reading. So it's still providing all that content up front as opposed to kids doing hands-on investigations and experiencing that and learning that as they go.
And the reason I ask that is obviously because we have the math program through there, and there is a lot of overlap in those two settings, and I'm sure there is in many other ways too. However, I think it's important to make sure that we've at least given it a fair look related to that. And one of the reasons for that is I believe we lose efficiencies and we lose continuity, which is a word I heard earlier, whenever we're using multiple different programs at multiple different layers. We water ourselves down. I realize one size doesn't always fit all, but maybe one size is better, even if parts of that one size aren't perfect. And so we've got a lot of different programs that we've embedded in this district. And that continuity starts to get fractured when you do that, especially when you do it grade level to grade level. We got one program for K through 5, and then we jump to a completely different program in 6. I don't love that philosophy or idea at all. And I don't love adding an additional program to the mix. I think all of you that have been around know I'm not a fan of wit and wisdom, and I've not been shying suggesting that. But I'm even less a fan of back and forth with some of this. And wit and wisdom doesn't give you everything you need K through 6, which concerns me. And now we're piecemealing things together again. How long has the Great Minds, which I guess in this case, I lost my train of thought with the name of that program, PhD. How long has PhD been around? And do they have any data supporting the success? Not just I like the program and it seems to work and everybody feels good about it, but do they have any data about results from those programs?
The program is a 2022 copyright, but it's been around longer than that. This version is 2022. Actually, the Twig materials are also 2022, so they're both about the same. For both of them, there's very limited data because it's really just science state testing data, which is only for Pennsylvania next year going to be aligned to the next generation science standards. or to the PA Steels, sorry.
Just a follow-up question too, with both of those programs, Twig and PhD Science. Do either of those programs long-term over that 6-year period that both curriculums run for 6 years, or it's supposed to be 6 years, do either of those programs require additional expenses later on more so than one of the others?
No, the 6-year content for both includes 6 years of online access, student books, and then all the supplies and materials. The only thing that we need to build into our budget are some things that would not be included in the supplies that we get. So for example, one of the 2nd grade pilot units that they did required them toasting bread. So we needed to buy bread. So like it's those incidental things that are like not they call them in the kits district supplied materials, but teachers don't have loaves of bread in their closets. So, you know, those things are in Aaron's elementary science budget that we continue to utilize as we currently do.
And that's the same for both?
Yep, that's the same for both.
Thank you.
I apologize for being late. Possibly I can talk to one of you two afterwards, or I don't know what makes sense. I was actually in downtown Mount Joy, and the 2 little dogs were running loose in the street. So me and another woman were chasing them, and somebody else got them, so they're safe. But
Is there video of this?
there's no video. There's no video. Well, I'm not moving real fast, but anyway. What's that?
A science real world problem to solve.
I did have one question though, just from the preliminary. These surveys, this is from students or this is from teachers?
So the one that you're looking at right there says students at the top. There are a couple graphs that are then from staff. So there's some
Okay,
student data and some teacher data.
so obviously being an engineer and a scientist, I'm definitely interested in this material. I'll get with whoever makes sense. My one question is, did we have any high school staff that are science teachers look at this material?
Yes, Sue Allen, who's one of our technology integration specialists, was a science teacher, so she was part of our group who initially looked at these materials.
How about any other science teachers in high school?
Yep, Mrs. Miller, who's the secondary science coordinator, has also been involved in this process too.
But they didn't do any surveys, they just looked at it briefly?
Right. Yep.
Because ultimately, they understand what they're coming into. And one of the things we always talk about is going from elementary to junior high to high school, which has been a struggle at times. So we did get some input from them, and they felt good about it, or how much time did they spend looking at it?
Yeah, I would say they didn't spend as much time as what we did at the elementary level, but certainly did take a look to make sure that, you know, this was something that was going to be good for us as a district. The one thing that the middle school teachers did with Mr. Buckwalter during an in-service day, several 6th grade teachers and middle school teachers, can I borrow your?
Yeah.
We had the standards printed out on cards like this, because 6th through 8th grade is still in a band. So as a district, we can determine when we teach the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards. So they had all of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards, and they basically laid them out on the table and said, okay, what can 7th grade tech ed do? What can 8th grade tech ed do? What can 7th grade science do? What can 8th grade science do? What can 6th grade science do? They each claimed what they wanted. And then of course there's stuff left that nobody wants. And so then it was figuring out, where did that stuff that doesn't really fit what we're doing now, where did that belong? Where did it make the most sense? So as a middle school group, 6 to 8, and Mrs. Miller as the secondary science coordinator was also involved in that, kind of determining where we did still have a band, where were those standards going to make the most sense?
Okay. And as we basically, these curriculums are kind of geared towards testing down the road, is that?
Yes, they are designed to adhere to the STEEL standards, which is what the new science BSSA is based upon.
Okay. And then a general understanding basic science principles beyond testing. I assume we think of that too, because
Yes.
I kind of struggle at times that everything goes to testing. And I remember previous superintendent said, Chris Adams said, we teach for the kids to learn. Testing is part of it, but it's not the only thing. So
Yeah.
I assume we're trying to do that
We are.
in both high school and elementary.
And the one thing that you'll see if you look at some of the assessments in PhD, which is one of the things that we did like about that program specifically, was that in the end of unit assessment, the students are presented with a new phenomena that they haven't studied throughout the course of the unit, but they take what they've learned throughout the unit and apply it in that new setting. So they can't just be regurgitating back the facts that they learned. They have to be able to construct evidence, make an argument, use data to support their claim with that new phenomena. So they're definitely applying things in a very different way than what they've had to in the past.
That just brings up another question. So that then is kind of reflected also in the state testing. So they're seeing it
Right.
real world, but then having to do those applications.
Right. So I was a fourth grade teacher, so I was the one who was lucky enough to give the old fourth grade PSSA. And I just remember teaching these very discrete pieces of vocabulary, like you had to know what all the phases of the moon were. And if you didn't know what a waxing gibbous was, you couldn't answer that question correctly. Now the PSSA has transitioned more into a test where you're given all kinds of data and then you are making interpretations based upon that data. So it no longer is a trivia test as much as it is a test of being able to think and take the data that you're presented and extrapolate from that. So it's a very different kind of test than what it used to be, which is why these programs are so different than what we've needed in the past.
Well, that sounds really good, and I'm not gonna ask any more questions. Maybe Doug, I'll catch up with you and chat because I missed the whole presentation, but thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So with the Wit and Wisdom and, or say any of the ELA, we had a lot of support for educating the teachers and getting them trained up on spinal illness. What does, if we do 2 programs like you're suggesting, I feel like that would be double the spin up because we have teachers 1 year do 5th grade and then maybe the next year they do 6th grade, right? So how does that look like and what's the expected time? Is it the same for both programs or different, or what does that look like on that side?
The times are different for both programs from what they recommend for their initial training. Because PhD is the same company as Wit and Wisdom, there's a lot of similarities. So the teacher editions, if you look at them, they follow the same lesson sequence. Students are using a lot of the same instructional strategies. So you'll see Socratic seminars, which we heard about at one of the previous meetings from some of the teachers. So there's a lot of things that will be familiar. They'll have 2 days of training is what the company is offering us in that set price. So the teachers will have probably some additional time to collaborate in that because they'll be able to go through the instructional routines much faster. Twig does a day of training and then they come back later and do additional training as a follow-up. We did the training in January and we ended up doing it on a snow when we had a 2-hour delay. So they squeezed our training in to a much shorter period of time and our pilot teachers were very comfortable with it. So if teachers do move from 5th grade to 6th grade or 6th back to 5th, there will be some learning that needs to take place, but both programs were very teacher friendly in terms of picking up what they needed to. PhD because we have Wit and Wisdom and are very familiar with it, and Twig because the platform is very easy to maneuver and manipulate.
Is there any difference in services for the teachers or students on the backside? Like you said about websites, things like that. Is there anything one has over the other?
Twig has a much greater web presence than what PhD does. And PhD is very similar to Wit and Wisdom in that it's stripped down. So when you look at the student book, it's not thick, it's very thin, but it's a log book is what they call it. It's a place where kids are recording their observations and recording the results from their experiments. Twig has many more videos, has a much greater, online component to it. So that's one of the differences in the back end. It was one of the things that I think the teachers were kind of attracted to as like a bright, shiny thing, like, ooh, look at this. But once they got into it, particularly in grades 5, what they realized was it was flashy, but it didn't have the actual learning as much as what they wanted to be there, which is why, as Doug was sharing, in 4th and 5th grade, PhD ended up outscoring Twig.
But it was almost flip-flopped in the kindergarten and first grade.
Yeah, kindergarten and first grade felt like for them, because kindergarten is still a half day. First grade, they have a very limited science time. It was easy for them to cut the Twig lessons into manageable pieces and chunks. And they had a more positive outlook on it. The one thing that we did find with Twig, when we did have that collaboration time, kindergarten, first, second, 5th grade teachers were all in the same room, and they were talking and then just overhearing each other, and they're like, wait a minute, what did you just say? And that's when we kind of saw some of the repetition pieces that 1st, 2nd, and 5th grade were all doing a very similar investigation that just had very slight tweaks between those grade levels. And so that's what alerted us to the fact that there were some repetition pieces in there that we needed to be aware of.
When we had coaches for the Wit and Wisdom, would we have also access to coaches with the PhD?
We will not have coaches embedded like we did for Wit and
Because it's
Wisdom.
not a pilot.
Just because, I mean, that was something that was part of what happened with that ELA adoption.
Mhm.
The quote that they gave us does include support for us if we need it throughout the school year.
Mhm.
Some virtual and on-site visits, but not specific coaches that are here every day.
Before.
Right.
Okay, thank
And
you.
again, a science adoption, while it involves a lot of materials, the time that's allotted for science instruction is much less than what's allotted for ELA.
Now, I've heard you mention that a couple of times, about the scheduling.
Mhm.
So if you want to expand the science time, what would you be taking away?
That's the $1 million question, is how do you get more time? The one thing that we've found with both of these programs is that they require a lot of setup. There's a lot of materials. And so what the feedback we got from teachers was, if K1 and 2, they have 30 minutes of science. So until they would set up science, get started, and then need to tear it down for the next subject to take place, they were getting maybe 15 to 18 minutes of actual science time. And so what we worked with principals to do was to say, okay, if we can't have a single lesson take 3 days, because then your first graders lose sight of what's happening over those 3 days. So instead of doing that, if you see a lesson that's very heavy in terms of materials and preparation, do that during your math block that day, because you have a full 75 minutes. You can get it set up, you can do the lesson, and then the next day, maybe you don't teach science, you do math for that extra block of time, get caught back up with your math, and then go back to your traditional schedule the next day. So we just have to be flexible with how we're using some of that time, so we're not losing time for setting up and tearing down materials.
And that would be consistent across every 4th grade class would make those
Right.
changes every 3rd grade.
And as part of our curriculum process, we will also be able to identify which lessons that takes place in, to give teachers that alert ahead of time to say, hey, in module 3, lesson 12, you're gonna need, this is a lesson that you're going to want to try to do during a math or ELA block, so that you can avoid that tear down and setup.
So you two come up with that so that all the teachers across the district know that?
Yeah, we'll work with teacher volunteers in each grade level over the summer to write
Mhm.
the actual curriculum documents. So we'll have those available for the teachers then when they come back to school in August.
And do you consider we've talked about pacing,
Mhm.
and so that we have unity across the district?
Yeah.
And so you feel that doing it that way is going to meet that same?
Yep.
goal?
All of the programs have 4 units in every grade level, except Twig 4th grade has 5, which is not one of the ones that we're recommending, but there are 4 units pretty much in every grade level.
Mhm.
Sixth grade has 2 units, but Twig's middle school series is very different than their elementary, so they're big units. So they will take some additional time. If you take a look at the Twig sixth grade materials, the way Twig works, it's a middle school program, so there are 12 units that are taught between sixth grade and eighth grade. When we divided up who was teaching what, sixth grade in terms of Twig will be teaching 1 sixth grade unit and 1 seventh grade unit. Content wise.
When I looked at the materials, there were a lot, and it sounds like 2 units, but it
But-
was a lot.
It's 4 units worth.
I have a clarifying question. The cost for both those programs, does Twig's cost include a 7th and 8th grade program as part of that, or are you comparing apples to apples with K through 6?
It's just the sixth grade, just those 2 sixth grade units.
For option 2.
Correct.
So this was a helpful presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
If the board is not able to approve this request, what is the plan B to address the standards?
If the board doesn't choose to adopt it, then we'll be,
We're writing our own,
Own.
which as we said, we've seen.
Pardon me?
We'd be writing our own at that point, and like I said, from talking to some of our neighbors who have engaged in that process, it is not a effective process. We would have to engage in that, but it is certainly not what our recommendation would be.
Thank you.
Have any districts worked collaboratively together to write a program or work together, especially those that can't maybe afford to purchase one on the fly? And has there been any consolidated effort to do that by other districts? And is Hempfield engaged in at least some discussions with that? Kind of following Mr. Keener's question.
at the elementary level, I do not know of any that have done that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. There's a lot of collaboration in learning about the new standards, but they are fairly new. So everyone is trying to piece together how to move forward and adopt curriculum that will work for their settings. Each school district is slightly different in terms of time allotments, schedules, things like that. So certainly there would have to be adjustments if something like that was done. Again, the curriculum companies have a lot of resources to put these complex programs together that do meet our needs, which is why most of the districts that we talk to are going down that path versus trying to write it on their own.
When and how will we be evaluated on the implementation of these standards? When does that actual evaluation start? So I understand these standards came out. If I missed this, forgive me. But when will you be evaluated on it? Who's going to be doing that? Will they come into the district and evaluate the fact that we've implemented these standards according to the expectations? What's that look like? For us, it's considered a survey. State gives you money or expectations, they come in and check on you. How does that look? And how will that work? And when will that actually, what's the start date that they could come and evaluate that, or doesn't it go like that?
Yeah, our responsibility is to meet all the state standards. We have flexibility in how we do that. It is assessed on the student end in the PSSA and the Keystone test. So making sure that they are prepared for those assessments is how it would come out on the data evaluation side. But they don't come in and open
That's
up.
how
our
we got
doors.
there.
Right, right.
That's interesting. I mean, and that's, so there really is not a drop dead date.
It is in the school code that we have to be aligned to these standards next year.
By what date? The start of the school
start of
year?
the school year, yeah.
And
We
then
have to-
they won't come in and evaluate whether you aligned yourself with those standards.
Yeah.
There's no check on that.
Just through our comprehensive plan and testing that we are meeting those standards is how that is done and checked.
And then the PSSAs become aligned to these standards next school year,
You mean 25, 26?
25, 26. Yeah.
They were field tested this year, so that's the move to grade 5 science. And there was no accountability measures in place for our students and staff on that test this year. It was our pilot year. That's why we tested the PSSA online with our 5th and 8th grade science. But next year the accountability kicks back in.
kind of an unrelated comment. It's not really a question, but when I was in the classrooms and I traveled around watching the pilot for Savas and for Wit and Wisdom, I can relate to some of the results that came from here from what I saw. What I saw was that, and I thought this is my observations, that Savas had a lot more elementary level, meaning the younger grades, materials, videos, things that helped the teacher with the younger population. And I think I'm hearing a bit of the same thing here, where Twig does a better job at those younger ages, and that Wit and Wisdom or PhD maybe catches up a little bit as they get a little older, because I felt like through the Wit and Wisdom observation that it was a lot more self-learning, which I would suggest, and you can disagree or correct me if you think I'm wrong, that self-learning often goes better with your higher achieving students, and that sometimes you need more material when you're talking about students that might struggle a little more just with the standard academic work, where maybe school isn't that's the easiest thing they do. So when I look at these two programs, I get a little concerned because the PhD part of this, just like what I saw with Wit and Wisdom, seem to do better at the higher grade levels with the higher achievers. I realize that's not totally true, so I don't want to, as I know we talked about the engagement that comes from some of those students that might struggle, but I'm hearing some of the same themes here. Part of the reason I wasn't as much of a fan of Wit and Wisdom from the beginning, I have some of those same concerns with the version of Wit and Wisdom for this program.
If this question's been asked before, I can stop, but have you talked to any neighboring school districts that have already put this in their experience?
So all of these are new because
So nobody has done it yet?
I don't know of anyone that adopted PhD or Twig this year.
I don't know of any districts that
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
new-
Everyone's ramping up to adopt next year and any of the programs that they're choosing, but
Is this just Pennsylvania or is this a national program?
they're a national company.
So is there other schools in other states that have already used it?
Yes.
But have we talked to any of those schools?
I haven't specifically talked to the schools in other states, no, but I do have lists of the districts. for
Would
both.
that be something good to do?
We certainly can do that. I can say from our assessment, we felt really good about all the materials that we utilize. And like I said, they received positive feedback from both the students and the staff. Our experts who have been studying these standards and really dug into the materials felt that they would do everything to prepare us for next year. But if that's an ask, we certainly can get that information.
Well, I mean, it's always good to hear
Sure.
somebody actually used it for a year to get some feedback. If we have some schools that aren't too far away that, I'm not saying talk to people out in Arizona, but maybe somebody in Maryland or New Jersey or Delaware.
We can do that.
Thank you.
If you do that, what's today, the 14th or 15th, you want us to make a decision by the 27th. So would you just feed that information to us or do
can
you want to
update
have
you.
that discussion at that May 27th meeting? And then still take because the 27th is the date they wanted us to decide.
I can share some of that before news as well.
Would that
Put
be
it through.
acceptable? Would that work?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Can you also do me a favor? I know you said you've worked from 1.8 million down to 1.7 million, and some of this recommendation of 2 sounded like it was financially based to try to balance, some of the financial challenges. I would ask that, I know you can't share the contracts with the other party, but I would also ask that you go back before we have to make a decision. And you let them know that they're competing with a bid that's a lot lower than theirs, meaning to Twig. And ask them if there's anything that they can do, that they need to do it before it comes to us for a vote and bring that back to us in that manner. I'd be happy to be part of that call or conversation if need be. If I can be assured that that's been done, that will assist us as we look at this final decision that's coming up quickly. And if I'm on their side of it, I would want to know that and have every opportunity to sharpen my pencil before a board made a decision. So give them that chance, and that will help me feel comfortable that you've done that as well.
Happy to do that.
Looking at the cost, I thought that you had done that with the option one, that you were able to drill down for a lower cost. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. I went back to them and asked for essentially, after some budget conversations had taken place, 1-year costs and 3-year costs versus 6-year costs. 1-year costs and 3-year costs. Number one, don't make total sense in our curriculum cycle, but just to see what they were. And so then they knew that we were looking budget wise at ways to make this work. So the next estimate did come down, but I can go back again, sir.
So it went down the second bullet point, 436 on and on million. So there was a decrease. Did you feel that was the final number? Or you'd go back again?
I mean, I can ask again and see.
Sure.
Kind of following up on that, it seems like, what's the justification of option 2 being the recommended? So it kind of seems like for me, it looks like the TWIG overall is the most consistent across all grade levels, consistent with teachers, everything else. When you talk about K1 through K, they like TWIG, and then 6th grade and bounce back and forth. What made you come to option 2 as the best option versus just do TWIG straight across the board? Because it looks like the data is pretty close.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of, we talked to the kindergarten, first grader, the first grade teachers, and they'll settle for it kind of concept. So why not that?
I definitely wouldn't classify it as settle. They felt good about the materials. I felt good about, I'll speak for myself, and if they have anything to add, we can go there. I felt good about both programs. I really do. I've looked at the materials. I've seen them in the classroom. I think they both are going to set our students to step up for success. I will say that cost is a large factor. Knowing the conversations that we're having across the district, beyond just cost, the continuity piece there is the other one. So option 3 splits it up more. I'm having multiple transitions between programs versus option 2, where I'm going K-5, testing in grade 5, and then moving to more a middle school approach, because some middle schools are 6 to 8, obviously. To me, with the cost factored in, made the most sense in terms of what implementation we should look at.
I heard 7 and 8 was part of this initial discussion a little bit, but hasn't been included in this presentation. Is there going to be a request, and I know I'm out ahead of myself a little, for the board to look at a 7 and 8 program ever? Okay.
No.
I'm seeing a hard no.
No.
All right.
The 7th and 8th grade science teachers are science trained.
Right.
And so they are writing their own.
And the same with biology in high school, right? Those are all also transitioning to the new standards, but they have been working on the curriculum revisions already.
Just curious, as I look at one of the charts y'all shared, would you recommend a pilot program for implementation at HSD? So did you guys get any feedback from those that either said I'd use either or would not recommend? Just because, when I take a look at like PhD grades 2 through 5, 59, so we'll call it 60% of the respondents were ambivalent or said no way. And when I look at TWIG grades 2, 5, that number is 25. So, because the only 25 was either ambivalent or.
It's 2 staff members, but yeah, it's 25%. Yeah. Yeah, it's small because it's a much smaller pilot than it was for the ELA, where we had 90+ teachers, right?
Yeah.
Those percentages were a little bit. So some of it's sample size, not a large. Some of it is having limited time with the program and understanding all the pieces that are in there. I think some of it probably has to do as well with the amount of time to implement these materials in the limited scheduling time that they have. So I would say there's a couple different factors in there. I don't remember, I can look through any of the
That's right.
open-ended, anything specifically that came up as well.
Yeah. I mean, the the feedback that we heard, and Aaron and I met with all of the pilot teachers at our in-service day in March. And essentially, I think one of the things, and that was after they had completed this survey, but one of the things that came out of that was both groups are saying there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of prep time, there's a lot of materials. And then they heard the other group say exactly the same thing. So a lot of the cons that we saw on those lists were cons for both programs. And quite honestly, that's just the way a science program that's aligned to these standards is going to be, because it's going to have a lot of stuff with it. You can't do a hands-on investigative approach without setting up materials. And so I think the teachers realized that and saw that as they were going through, but then you also get the student excitement that is very obvious when they're engaged in them. So.
And this is just, I don't understand maybe the slide. Why is it 100% K through 6 want Twig? Is that?
So all 4 of the teachers who piloted Twig in grade 6 wanted to adopt that program.
Oh, that was just 6.
4 out of
Is
it.
it just has K16, so
Sorry, yeah, you're right. That would have included the additional
one.
kindergarten and first grade teachers there. So there was what, 8
Yes.
between those 3 grade
Yeah.
levels.
so, okay.
So is this,
Those 3 grade levels only had Twig being implemented, so this is why I broke them out
Oh,
separately.
so no one did the kindergarten or first grade?
Correct.
They only did Twig.
No one did PhD. They
No one did
Twig.
PhD.
Correct.
Which is why we had them look at PhD to see.
So we haven't piloted both programs in those 2 grades, just one.
Correct. Right.
They're-
It was a much smaller pilot, like I said. Yep, much smaller in scope, much smaller in number of staff that were using it. A lot of it was based on the evaluation that they did for the material or for the programs, and then how they would use it in that unit. And you saw some of the reasons on the slide as to why.
so is this a drastic change from what we've been doing?
It is.
So one of my questions, just hearing you talking, is could it be, and this is why maybe talking to some schools that did it, could it be this interactive approach? Maybe it's going to be too much to cover the time-wise, what you're talking about, and maybe some schools that have implemented it can share, yeah, you can't get through all the material or stuff like that. I mean, is that a valid concern? Because based on what you just told me a few minutes ago, it's good to have the interactive thing and that's part of it, but what if you don't get through all the content?
Right, and that's where we've been making some of those allowances, that instead of making what should be a 40-minute lesson take 3 days, we're gonna make it take 1 day by being flexible with what time of the day we're using it for. So it is a shift in how instruction has been happening, but it's not impossible. It's a doable change. It just requires us thinking about our time in a little bit different way.
I mean, absolutely the interactive and experimentation, but you also got to be careful you don't get enough content, and they don't learn all the material. Maybe it's fun to do all those experiments, but if you haven't learned the fundamentals that you're trying to teach the kids, did you really gain what you think you're going to gain?
Right, and it's almost like it's flipped on its head. So instead of learning all the content and then doing the experimentation, it happens the other way. So you do the experimentation, use the results of that to make sense of what's happening, and then the teacher is delivering instruction. So that content's still being mastered. It's just happening on the back end instead of the front end.
So I have a question, and maybe it's the wrong question to ask, but I'm looking at these 3 options.
Mhm.
If price wasn't a question, which we know it always is, but which option would you want to, which option, after everything that you 2 have done, well, 3 actually, have done and observed and talked with the teachers, which option would you choose? And I appreciate all the work
Yeah.
you've done and looking to save dollars for us, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think option 1 and option 2 make great sense. To me, option 3 does not make as much sense, mainly because of the transitions. But I really feel
Just do
comfortable.
hopscotch.
If costs were not a factor, I would feel both comfortable with 1 and 2. Those are both great options in my mind.
Mhm.
Well, I like what Justin said. Twig knows they can get some more business. Maybe they'll knock that price down.
We will go back and try it again.
Oh,
Got it.
right, I just want to know which one you think is going to be the best for our kids right now, and then,
Yeah.
and maybe that's too hypothetical, because in the end, we know dollars drive what we do.
Right. Like I highly value the teacher's feedback. So for me, the fact that K and 1 feel like Twig was the best option for them. Again, they only use Twig, nobody used PhD, but I want to honor that. However, I also, when that became the prevalent feeling among the K1 teachers, I also went back very carefully through K1 Twig and second grade PhD and found that there are some things that we would have to work through in that transition. And the fact that we have K to 5 and then have a test in 5th grade, it does make me a little nervous to have 2 different programs within that tested band. When we reach 5th grade and move to 6th, now we're looking at a 6 to 8 band where we've divided up the standards and we know that is its own separate piece, which makes me more comfortable with option 2. Seeing the programs in action in classrooms, I will definitely say that I felt that PhD was much more engaging for kids and had kids doing more hands-on experimentation than what Twig did. So for me personally, K to 5 Twig. 6th grade Twig is their middle school program, and I was blown away by what our 6th graders were doing. And honestly, they piloted an 8th grade unit because we were only allowed to pilot certain units in Twig. And the 6th grade team decided, well, if we know we're going to use a 6th grade and a 7th grade unit, we might as well try an 8th grade one, because if it's too hard, that's a concern we're going to have to deal with, because Twig as a company said, you can use any of our middle school units in any grade level and they'll work. So they chose to do an 8th grade one to see if it was going to work, and it did. And what those kids were doing in 6th grade was really amazing. So I'm very comfortable with Twig 6th grade. I'm not as comfortable with Twig and K to 5.
So you would, option 2.
So
What's your
honestly,
preference?
option 2 would be where I would land.
Aaron?
It's hard for me to go against teacher preference. So I agree that I think there would be a caveat with option 3 of if teachers understood the overlap that was present with K and 1 and PhD, and then 2nd grade as well. I think that would take a lot of work over the summer to figure out what are we going to be hitting twice. Kids will be learning this in 1st grade, but then they're going to hit it again with this new curriculum in 2nd grade. So I think if the willingness was there for the teachers to figure that out, and possibly create and make that bridge from K to 1 Twig into PhD, if that willingness was there and the manpower was there to do that work, then I would probably side with option 3, coming from a teacher.
And we want to be mindful of how we utilize our teachers' time
Sure.
as well. And we want them to be well prepared.
Okay.
Other comments, questions?
I just have one comment. I am surprised, Mr. Hoffman, to hear you after we went through the Savas and the wit and wisdom discussion and favoring the teacher's preference, that you're kind of on the other spectrum of this one related to the survey results. So that did come as a surprise to me. I would also, I would also suggest that even though financials are an issue here and are a concern, and I'm probably the king of that, I have some other concerns about us piecemealing things together and the continuity that I talked about. I believe teachers are versatile. I believe that they can go through and they can figure this out. I'm not concerned about that. I just don't think it's as smooth. The other thing I would say is have we really, and this is a loaded question because some of you aren't going to like me for suggesting this, but I know we have a lot of talented people here and we have a lot of strength, bench strength. I really do wonder why we haven't maybe made an attempt to tweak our lessons to maybe fit this new criteria. And if that's really would have been an option, we should have explored more. I don't know that it may be too late to even consider that, but I do think that with the talent that we have here, that maybe is something that we should have maybe taken a little more seriously. I think we discounted that pretty early from what I heard, and we had to get a program. And so we were all in looking and piloting to find a program. And I'm just questioning if we gave that, a true chance to be successful, even though I know we've heard some negative from other districts.
It's beyond just the other districts. I strongly believe that's not a viable option for us. One, the supply costs are going to get us close to what we're paying for a program anyway, just in itself, not even talking about the expertise of writing the curriculum. Two, our elementaries are not subject specialists like they are in the secondary, right? They're more generalists, right? So they're typically, that expertise that you're talking about is not as strong in one specific subject area. And this is more than just a minor tweak to what they have done in the past. These are very complex, rigid standards that are causing us to rethink how we are teaching science to our students more so than we have in the past. So I will say that I do feel strongly that was not a path that I thought was appropriate for Hempfield, and why I think that the exploration of the programs makes the most sense.
Can we go back to slide 5, that sort of summarizes what the standards are? The science, the tech and engineering, and environmental literacy all make sense to me. I'm unclear what we mean when we say environmental justice, equity, and economic stability for current future generations. Help me better understand that part of the standard and how it is relevant to an elementary age student population. They seem like kind of more high level, graduate level social science concepts.
Those are things you start with at a young level and build on them slowly but surely, and you build
Right.
the idea and appreciation for things. But again, this is what is coming from the state, not Hempfield, as far as what the standards are.
And these are also K to 12. So this is from a kindergarten through 12th grade lens. So some of those things, might be invasive species. So how is a spotted lanternfly being introduced into this part of the world led to economic issues, led to crops being destroyed? That's where some of that economic stability comes into play. Looking at integrated pest management, how has our use of pesticides led to the decline of pollinators? So all of those things that, at a very simple level, why do we recycle? Why is it important that we have recycling? And that because we have, the big 4 in Lancaster County, why is it important that we only recycle those big 4? So those are some of the things that fall into that environmental literacy and sustainability category.
Okay, and again, how will that be built into an elementary curriculum?
So for example, just looking on the Steels Hub right now, if I pull up the environmental
Like,
literacy. and
help me
sustainability-
understand how the concept of environmental justice is being taught to a 3rd grader.
So some of the things that they're talking about in kindergarten through 2nd grade, students can demonstrate this understanding by categorizing ways people harvest, redistribute, and use natural resources.
What was that?
How categorize ways that people harvest, redistribute, and use natural resources. So how they use natural resources. Explain how people from different cultures and communities, including one's own, interact and express their beliefs about nature. Explain ways that places differ in their physical characteristics, their meaning, their value, and their importance. So those are some of the can-dos. I mean, there's quite a number of them online that gives you examples of how they're setting the stage. It would not be as in-depth as some of the points that you're discussing right now, which we'd see more in the intermediate and the secondary grade levels. But they are introducing students to those topics so that they can build on them in years to come.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my loaded question is which option or course of action will help our kids to understand and comprehend basic science principles? Any thoughts there? And that's probably impossible to tell. I'm not just talking about doing well in the test, but which option here, which programs are going to help our kids fundamental? I mean, in elementary school, I do agree with Grant a little bit. This right column, that's more for high school. Not saying you can't introduce it, but if they don't understand the basic science principles, they can't really make judgments on these other areas. So if you were going to pick an option, which option do you think will help our kids understand science the best? And that's probably an impossible question to answer.
I don't think it's an impossible question. I think we stand behind both these programs. I don't think we would have brought them forward to pilot if we didn't feel that they both would do that well for our students. Like I said, I really feel that we could very successfully, if cost wasn't an issue, implement option 1 or option 2 well, and our students would be well served. Our teachers would have the resources that they would need to develop those standards. I know you weren't here in the beginning. There, a lot of the science thinking that you're talking about is part of these new standards and the new assessments. So that is baked into what we are going to be teaching our students going forward. At the end of the day, I do believe that option 2 makes the most sense for us as a district.
But both option 1 and 2, the kids are going to understand the scientific,
100%.
fairly similar. You don't think there's going to be a big difference as far as they may comprehend more and test better and learn more with one versus the other?
I feel strongly they both would do a great job.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Just a comment, I was able to get in 1 or 2 days, I think, to watch some of the science classrooms, and they were very engaged. And that word just really jumps out from your presentation. The toast experiment was a delightful day to be there because the whole hallway smelled like toast, and you just wanted to cozy up with a cup of tea. The kids were using language naturally that they're using in other parts, the notice and wonder, which they're using in other curriculum areas too. So I think it's all becoming so much more natural for them, and things that they're learning from their wit and wisdom, the language they're learning from that about what did I notice? What do I wonder? They're doing that in their scientific method as well. So I saw the crossover between them.
Which grades did you?
It was multiple. I think we
Oh,
popped
okay.
in and out of 4 or 5
Mhm.
different
We did.
grade levels throughout the day. But in either case, both, I saw
The same.
Twig and I saw PhD, and in each grade level, the kids were excited and they were busy and active and well-behaved. They weren't getting off task because they were enjoying the discovery. So I was excited about it.
Do you have anything else we didn't ask that we need to know?
No, as I always say, I mean, if anyone else would like to see it in action, we certainly can set that up. I know we don't have a ton of time and teachers are through their units, but I know we have staff that would be willing to share their experiences with you. So please just reach out. I'll be happy to do that for you.
Anyone else? So your recommendation is option 2.
Yep.
Okay. And
We
then
have
we
to-
need to make the decision by May. You're asking we make the decision by 27th.
May 27th, I have 2 takeaways. I'm going to come back with some feedback that I can find from others who have implemented in other states, and then going back to the companies about costs and trying to drive down those costs. Get the
And
final.
you'll let us know that through board news.
I will.
In that case, I think that concludes this part, the education program meeting.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Johnson. We'll take a recess until 6:40. All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and proceed to the policy, personnel, and legal portion of the agenda. Starting with policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students, Dr. Musser.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keener. So I'd like to add some context around this policy first. As you can see, we cut it up pretty good. I want to share the context and the fact that the district way back in 2010, when this policy was first adopted, actually, like many school districts, accepted tuition students. Because of our class sizes, because of everything else, because of some of the funding that was there, and the responsibility around it, it was actually an advantageous thing for districts to do. In 2010 or 2018, when this was last revised, we were starting to see a shift in that across the districts, where we started to experience students that required specially designed instruction, also starting to pick out destination districts, coming to these districts and then paying what the tuition rate is that we could charge, but then actually the cost of educating the student were significantly higher. So the board back in that period of time took a step and working with our legal counsel at the time to develop this policy. So they went from a accepting of tuition students to a kind of intermediary policy, if you will, of discouraging it and not jumping right to forbidding it. So I think there was a little bit of confusion used in the policy. So we tried to clean that up with this new revision. We also had to add 3 new sections according to law. We had to add the Educational Stability Act in there with students that are experiencing educational stability. We still have to educate them. We added the child military piece, which is another requirement. And we also had to add that section right there in red that Mr. Graham just scrolled to. There's actually an appeal process now that is required by districts for us to prove you're not in the district. So in prior years, if we were able to prove to a family that they were not in the district, we could send them what we refer to as the no longer living in district letter. We'd work with whatever school they were going to, we'd transfer records, and all that would take place in a fairly timely manner. Now we actually have to provide an opportunity for a hearing. The law is not clear in who needs to participate in that hearing. We've not had any hearings scheduled yet. Most of our families have been very cooperative in working with us, but we did need to add that section into the policy as well. There is a section I'd like some board discussion around. If you scroll down a little bit, Graham, it's in the aqua there. Down there at the bottom under former residents. So the previous policy only allowed students to stay in the district as a senior if they were in the district their entire K to senior year. When the board last redid this policy, you adjusted it to just their time at the senior high school. So they have to be there from ninth grade on to remain tuition free if their family left the district. I was curious, as we're redoing this policy, if the board still feels inclined to leave it there or make other adjustments to that period of time.
Thank you, Dr. Musser. Questions, comments about the policy in general, and particularly with regard to the part that Dr. Musser has highlighted for discussion? Mrs. Brady.
Just generally, how often does something like that occur?
The senior.
Yeah.
So normally I do 2 or 3 a year. I have not done any this year.
Okay.
So I would say normally 1 to 2 on average a year.
Thank you.
And they do have to be in good standing. We can always revoke it. So if it's one of those things where we do grant it for a senior and then they do move out of the district or try to go to a cyber or some other, we can revoke that. We always have the ability to do that.
Am I confusing this question with something else? And I'll just ask it. Isn't it, if a family would move out of the district and a student wants to finish with our district, isn't it on the new district to pay Hempfield a fee
No,
to complete
that
year?
used to happen back in the days before all these policies came into place. Some of that used to happen. Now the residency rules and laws are very, very strict with transportation costs and everything else. So no, the only time that they get to stay with us in this policy is if it's after April 4th deadline or April 1st.
So we basically then are funding Well, I shouldn't say that. We'd be funding their education anyway, so
We
it
make sure that.
seems like it's insignificant from a financial standpoint.
It really is at that point. Transportation would be your big cost driver at that point, but they have to provide their own transportation. And we also monitor attendance. They also need to be doing a good job in the school with their grades. If any of those things slip, we do have the ability to revoke that.
And maybe it's just how I'm reading it, but it doesn't say, does it have to be freshman, junior, all 3 years? Because it just says attending school. So are we saying that they could come for just their junior year and come back for free for their senior year?
Yeah, the intent of the board with that language at the time was in its entirety. So they were in the high school for the entirety of their high school career if they were allowed to finish their senior year. I know other districts have it, their junior year. You can have it be to your discretion. I don't recommend that because then the board's always, why did you let this one stay for freshman year or anytime you have special circumstances? I think it'd be cleaner for the board to have a target, but I'm open to.
No, I
however-
just don't see it clearly stated in there. I know it's what the intent is, but I
Yeah.
just don't see how it's worded that
Yeah.
way, so.
Who has attended the high school program in its entirety.
There's a missing word up there.
Yeah, I
It should
think it-
say in its entirety.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also says for the senior year, it's for free. So what's the entirety, the first 3 years, and then they come back to
Yeah,
senior year?
yeah.
Is that how?
Up until the senior year, because the senior year is the only year it's optional to use this clause.
I think it makes sense because they're going to want to graduate with the class that they've been with. I think it'd be tough. I mean, not that you couldn't enforce it to send a senior that's been with their class all through high school and send them to a new school to graduate. It just doesn't make sense. So, and they have to find the transportation. So if they move far enough away, it takes care of itself. If they're willing to get there and make that work and make those sacrifices and they're a good student, it makes sense to let them finish.
Either way, I do poll a report. I ask the principals if they're in good standing. I put that all in board news and then you will vote to approve that or not to approve that. So if there is a concern, you always have the power to deny that vote.
Question, what about athletics? If that student moves to another district, we're saying they can do their senior year, they'd still be an athlete in our.
As long as the board approves that, we're still okay.
That won't conflict with PIAA or?
Mr. Maris.
I'm sorry. That won't conflict with PIAA or anything?
We have not had that issue in the past. I can certainly double check if that is an issue moving forward.
I'm not so much against us doing it. I'm worried, could we get, if it's a good athlete, they move out of the district, other schools may say, well, you can't participate on Hempfield anymore because you don't live in Hempfield. So,
I think in the past, as long as the boards applied the policy evenly and not in favoritism of any athlete, I think we've been okay in the past is how I would read that, but I can certainly double check.
sure, okay.
I don't think this is going to happen too often, but
Doesn't.
Okay.
And
Any, Mr.
this
Donato?
is for the student who starts the year as a senior and parents move somewhere else because of whatever reason, they can finish their senior year. If I'm reading this correctly, if they move during the summer, then they go to whatever, school they moved to. Okay. I'm okay with that. I do remember approving.
Yeah, it was something that I felt hard. It was hard to me to bring to the board for a student that spent, maybe 8 years here, but didn't get their entirety. And we're, asking them to move on their senior year. I don't think the board enjoyed it either. I think the high school period makes sense, but if you wanted to go less or more, that's certainly within your purview.
The only question that I would have is, I absolutely agree that we should allow them to complete. My question is, if we require in its entirety, what about a situation where a student moves into the district at the beginning of their sophomore year, completes their sophomore and junior years here, then the parents move, they would not be permitted to.
No, they would not.
Is that what you view as a desirable outcome, or, but we also don't want people to forum shop either, so.
That's exactly right. You're kind of
Yeah.
like right in the middle there. I am very sympathetic to the senior year and especially with the housing market and how difficult it is. That's why we changed some of the renting language so we can use some of the addresses a little earlier. At the end of the day, if it's the board's desire to do sophomore year on, that would also be acceptable. Again, to Mr. Walgamu's point, it's not a cost driver for the district right now.
Mrs. Johnson?
So there's no exception. I've been sitting here thinking, as a military family,
Y- y-
how that might affect.
You know, as the legal guy, how much I love exceptions. Like anytime you have an exception, then you need to be able to back that exception up. You need to remain consistent. You can certainly have language in there. We just need to be consistent in its application.
You kind of have, don't you kind of have that statement down here about the military? Doesn't that cover all that as well?
Yeah, that section's covered there, but I just, in overall examples though.
You still get money from the government for military students.
Yeah, the military is a different altogether, but I'm just, in any of those situations, I'm a little more sympathetic.
They kept up with my kids when they were attending Hempfield schools.
And again, if it's a family that's moved 3-4 times within that year, then the educational instability piece we can apply as well. So there's a number of different ways we can try to meet the needs of that student already here for those exceptions. If there's another exception that the board would like us to further expand on in policy, we can. I'd feel more comfortable doing that than just putting an open exception clause in, if that makes sense.
And I personally think this strikes a pretty good balance.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move this to first reading. Policy 338 sabbatical and 338-1. Do you want to take them together, Mr. Bomersky?
Yeah, they are, they do go together. They are new policies. We do not currently have them. And before I get any further, in our collective bargaining agreement, there is an article around sabbaticals. I want you to ignore that concept because these two policies do not pertain to that. Even though policy 338 says sabbatical, that is what comes out of school code. So this policy, policy 338, is focused on a sabbatical for restoration of health. That is required under school code. However, we typically do not see that request because of things that we provide our staff in terms of things around income protection and whatnot within parts of their jobs. But as we were working through this process, because we've received a request for a professional development leave, which is the next policy I'm going to bring forward. And as I was working through this, realizing we don't have these policies, it was recommended to us that we should have both on the books. So this is a new policy that we are working through. I think it's pretty straightforward as to what it is. And to note that on the 338, the sabbatical leave for restoration of health, that is all done working with our human resources team because there's medical documentation, there's things that have to be reviewed, there's timelines, there's things that they have to get if someone is on that leave. So that is a policy. It is very straightforward. I checked numerous districts do have this policy. And so I wanted to just bring that forward, thinking we should add it to our policy manual. So it's there. If anyone wants to look at it or ask questions, I'm happy to take any.
How have we been handling this in the past as it relates to the way this policy was written? Because I don't have a lot of perspective in here, but I look at this and say, okay, so who's going to be leaving on a professional development for a year of a school term or 2 half terms during a period of 2 years?
Are you on 338?
I'm on 33881.
I'm only on 338.
Okay, all right, I'll
Yep,
slow
I'll
down.
get to that one next. Yep.
I'm assuming this is non-paid.
This is a half pay.
Half pay.
Yes. There's a section for compensation.
So I'm clear, define restoration of health. I know what it means, but I want to hear I want to make sure I got that.
If someone has a serious medical illness,
Okay.
that they are unable to do their job and they've exhausted all of their leave options through FMLA and other things that we provide, this is a potential avenue. However, we do provide another mechanism. So we've never had this request, to my knowledge, since I've been here. But this is something that someone could pursue if they were not eligible for some of those other pieces that we provide.
Never heard of a medical sabbatical, and that's the way I'm terming this.
Yeah.
It seems awkward to me, to be honest. I'm not wrapping my head around this. Is this a legal requirement
It is
under the labor laws?
It is legal per school code that someone can request it. And it came about because I have a request for the next policy, but as I was doing the research on this, we don't have this policy, and this is the springboard policy, which is why you have 3.338.1. And so I felt like it needed to get into our policy manual in case it comes up as a request.
So,
But it is permissible by code. Someone can request it, but they have to work through our HR team to see if they qualify for it.
but it's not required by code.
It is required by code.
Okay,
Somebody can elect by code to do this, and we do not have a policy in
Okay.
place should someone want to do this or try to do this.
So
This is a proactive measure to
So
make sure
it's-
we have something in place.
If they meet the requirements, they qualify, there's not a set number that we're allowed to do. It's not like the other sabbatical.
There is a set, it is, things are in here in terms of it's no more than 10% of the employees that could qualify for it. They do have to go through a series of pieces and work through with their human resource team to see if they qualify based on the need for that restoration of health.
is the 10% and the half pay and everything that's listed in here, is that all coming from
It's all code.
directly from school code?
Yes. School code.
As well as the 10 years of of service to public schools in the Commonwealth and 5 in the
Yep.
district.
Yep.
So really, we're just taking the language
All straight
and
comes
just
from
copying and
Okay.
pasting it over
Yeah.
into this policy.
That's
I
it.
just
That-
want to
that's
make,
it.
oh, go ahead.
and is that the same as case with 338.1? Is that we're just, the policy simply parroting requirements under the school code?
Yes, but, and I'll get to that on 3.3.1.
So, and I'm guessing the school code doesn't give you an out with like short-term, long-term disability to.
Those are all the pieces that would be reviewed with our human resource team to see what they're eligible for or what they've done and what they would qualify for.
So multiple steps
Yeah,
ahead
it's
of the.
not just as easy as someone saying, I want to take the next semester off to
Sleep.
not feeling great, so I want to feel better or sleep. This is true, serious medical needs where there's significant medical treatments that need to be in place, and someone needs time to be able to come back full time, and they just can't medically, and they've been cleared by doctors and things like that.
That's what I thought FMLA was for.
It is, but you're only eligible for FMLA for a period of time, and once you expire that, you do have this available per code.
Wow. Okay.
Any other questions or comments about 338?
The next one, 338 point.
Are we in favor of moving this to
Sorry.
first reading? Okay,
I'm not in favor of the sabbatical piece at all across the board in general, but I guess we have to do
And
it.
that's the
We-
thing, I
we-
mean, like, it's,
This is,
you
this
kind of,
code, we have to do
you're
it.
hamstrung, right? So.
Yeah, this is an option.
Like I said, we've not had this because of other things we provide, but because it's the springboard for 338.1, I don't want to embed 338.1 without having 338 in the policy manual. So 338.1 is compensated professional leaves, and this will solely be for professional development leave. While we offer sabbatical under the collective bargaining agreement, that has different constraints and parameters around it. This one directly comes from code. Districts that do not have sabbatical like we have in our collective bargaining agreement, this is what is followed because it is what's in code. So there are a few options. The one I'm recommending is only professional development leave. Some of the other options that the board could consider would be like job exchange, where you want to leave the job you're in for a period of time and go explore a job somewhere else, potentially looking to see if that's something of interest. You have options. I solely want to keep it focused on professional development leave. And the reason for that is because this is something that staff could choose to do, but when you go through this, there are certain requirements for eligibility. There is a process that has to be followed. There are timelines that need to be met. There's documentation, things that need to be submitted. This particular professional development leave does have to come through from me to you from a board standpoint, where you will actually review the application. You will determine if it's a leave that you want to pursue or have a staff member to pursue or not. There are some options with regards to what can be done. I have left it solely with the 9 graduate credits per semester, or 18 graduate credits for the full year, 9 each semester. And the way this one works is someone can elect to take a half or full school term, or for 2 half terms in a period of 2 years. The pay for this is half pay only. And anyone who chooses to participate in this has to submit a detailed plan of specific activities, and then upon return has to submit to me within the first month a formal report describing the educational activities pursued, their benefits. Any failure to respond to that results in the forfeiture of any monies paid by the district. And compensation while on leave, they're certainly entitled to their benefits still. So I do have a request for this type of leave. And when I received that request, we do not have a policy, which is why I'm trying to move through the policy piece so that we can evaluate this accordingly and move through. And I'll be bringing you information on that in the coming weeks.
So this one is optional. We don't have to grant it.
This is the policy and option is required by code, but you as a board get to determine if this is, when you receive the applications, if it's something you feel is appropriate and should be granted.
So this is outside of the regular sabbatical leave for through collective bargaining.
Correct.
Just to clarify, we've been living without this policy since the beginning of time, and now all of a sudden, when did this become school code? And
it has been school code for a very long time. This is what many districts use, but when it comes to the traditional sabbatical for professional development leave. Some districts do have some different options provided to their staff through their collective bargaining agreement. That's outside of this.
yeah, I understand that piece. I just was trying to wrap my arms around why all of a sudden now we have a policy when we've been working without one for probably a lot longer than all of us have been here. And so my follow-up question to that is in this 338.1, is there anything in this policy that is not direct from school code that is different, changed, or in any way?
No. This is from school code.
And we're, sorry.
And I'm understanding you kept some things out, even.
Yes, there are things that
Like
you
the
can-
job exchange.
job exchange and things that are options that you can consider. I just felt that because of what conversations that we've had, it should be pertaining to professional development, and that has been the focus. So
The
So
two
the-
things, are we required to have this and sabbatical by school code, or we only have to, we're required to have this one, but we have to have sabbatical because in the contract?
anything that the board and HEA have agreed to in the contract, you're required to do.
Yeah, I know
And
that,
then
but
this is an option for individuals per code. But if without a policy, and if you get those applications or requests, you need to have a policy in place to make sure you can follow through with that.
and do we also have to pay for their education in this one? Like,
This would fall back to what you have for tuition reimbursement within the collective bargaining agreement, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it would just default to school code if we didn't have a policy.
It would, but when you get something, it's easy for you to have a policy to work through when you are reviewing things, yeah.
That's just why I wanted to make sure there was nothing different than school code that would create what I would call a potential discrepancy that might be a problem. Okay.
So the sabbatical through the collective bargaining, that's full pay, correct?
That is correct.
And this
Yeah.
is half pay.
Correct. That's why when I kind of think of that word sabbatical, put it away for right now. This is a professional development leave. It's a different, similar concept, just different title.
I can't help but say these sabbaticals don't occur in any other part of the working world that I'm aware of. And maybe Pat's shaking his head because he's usually one to bring this up. But it doesn't, the whole thing doesn't sit well with me, but it is what it is.
I'm with you. I don't know. The 338, I get, all right, fine, a medical piece, that's to me different. I just look at this and I think, man, 54 teachers could be out at one time. Because, you know what I mean? Like,
But
But
we
you
don't,
have
we
to
don't,
approve
we
it
don't
as
have
a
to
board.
approve
Again,
it.
to be clear, this
It's
would
up to the
fall
board.
only to non-members of the CBA.
Correct. This is outside the
no,
CBA.
it's not.
No?
Anybody.
Eligible.
Everybody?
No.
I thought, okay.
No, you have the ability for individuals who are under this collective bargaining agreement to be eligible for sabbaticals under that agreement. This also applies to our professional employees. It is per school code. They can take a professional development leave that is different than what's under the CBA.
Right.
So there's basically two options.
Basically, our CBA is stronger than this, so they're not going to default to this one. Am I missing
No.
anything there?
I think that's true.
The board has to approve this, though, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Right.
Because I would surely default to this one over the CBA, but I know we can't do that.
Okay. Mrs. Johnston?
I think you answered what my question is. Like if someone from Human Resources or from the tech department wanted to go and take a sabbatical leave, this policy covers that?
This
Or is it
policy
Just for teachers?
solely covers, if you go back to, let me pull it up here.
Administrative employee.
Administrative employees, so it would be anyone under an Act 93 agreement. And then professional employees, which would fall under the collective bargaining agreement.
Administrative employees, that would include
If Mr. Graham would
yeah.
like to take a professional development leave, he is an administrative employee. This policy would pertain to him should he submit an application that you would have to review.
His wheels are turning right now.
no, I can see them, but is,
I see that, Corinne.
is that, and I don't know anything about different qualifications, but like if one of our landscape person.
It would not.
It has to be
It's
not
administrator.
support staff, it
Correct.
has to be administrative.
Correct.
Okay.
But that individual, should they potentially need other things, would work with our HR team to see if this something applied to them.
Certification to the-
Right.
To get their
Correct.
certification.
Is there a,
Thank you.
a way that you could every 2 years resubmit for this? Or could you do a sabbatical and then do this and be basically 4 years not be in school?
No.
He has to approve it.
It would have to come in front of the board.
Is there anything in
That
school?
would be 4 years though.
Well, 3 years.
It could be, no. A half term.
You'd have to do a half term,
Right.
and then you'd have to actually be one of the two moving forward for the full term,
Right.
half term, full pay sabbatical that's currently offered.
I mean,
So
if you played your cards right over the course of a 30-year career, you could work half, I mean, like you could.
Is there a way to put a limit on this? Because the sabbaticals is for education for a master's or doctorate, if I remember correctly.
it could be a professional development leave where you're going and earning a certificate or just taking classes towards something else based on your role in the district, and that it could benefit your what you do and then ultimately impact students. And that would all be part of the application that would have to be submitted.
I have a suggestion. I'm hearing concerns around the potential for overuse of this. I think I checked in school code. The 9 graduate credits and the 18 graduates credits are the minimum by school code. We can increase that number. And frankly, 9 credits in a semester is a part-time load. So if we would want, we could simply increase the minimum credit requirements to make certain that if people avail themselves of this policy, that it truly is a rigorous, fulfilling experience. So an easy way to do that would be to change 9 to say 12 or 15 and 18 to 24 to 36 or something. And that could make it, I think that might address some of the concerns that I'm hearing.
And I don't say this pridefully, just from my experience, I was pulling 18 credits and working full time. And I'm not suggesting everybody would do that or can do that, but I do kind of agree with you, Mr. Keener, that 9 credits is part-time load.
It is a part-time load. So I'm just gonna throw this out here. Why don't we say for one semester, the minimum is 14, and for a full year, the minimum would be 28.
They're only in credits of 3 and 3 credits per
Different
class.
types of, you can,
But they
2
might not
credits,
be
3 credits. and
It's
4
rare to see 1, 2, or 4 credits in a graduate program.
multiples of
Typically 3, multiples of 3.
Okay, then, all right, then 15 and 30.
It sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about
My
that?
only concern with that is, I don't entirely disagree with the premise, but the ability to schedule the classes that you need at that level sometimes can be difficult to get them all to align at the same time. And so then you might be taking extra classes just to meet that number
Mhm.
that you don't necessarily need for your certificate. So that I don't know that for certain. It's just like my experience when I was doing grad work was they're not always offered at the time that you need it
And you won't know if you're doing this
in advance.
in advance because you typically only see that semester what's available, and you also don't know what the college is going to offer. To your point, Mrs. Brady, what happens in that second semester. You could think you want to take certain things, but if it's not offered, then what? It's already been approved because you won't know ahead of time from the university.
Yeah, but you don't have to take everything when you're on sabbatical.
If you do, in this scenario, you'd have to take it in that time frame you're on sabbatical.
You can split that time frame up.
Wouldn't that though, with what Mr. Garber and Mr. Wagner were worried about, like people taking more time? I mean, they could just accumulate a lot more credits in the fashion that you're suggesting, Mr. Keener, like upping the credit load, like someone could, I'm exaggerating, get like another degree if you're saying the time, like if they take it multiple, I don't know. I'm just
I
giving
was-
a
I was-
scenario that kind of came
I was
up.
looking at like every 5 years, you could take 2 semesters off, right? There's a limit to that. Right,
I know, but if he's saying
But the credits-
list
but-
of credits.
but we're only paying for 9 credits according to the CBA. So that's
So-
on your own as well.
I think as a practical matter, since we're only paying for a certain number, we set the limit higher, it will ensure that only people who are very motivated students will avail themselves of this opportunity.
I
Right.
agree.
And they're gonna have to be motivated because you're gonna go pay for a bunch of credits on your own and then take half back.
Yeah.
You're gonna be motivated. In that case, hey, more power to you.
Yeah,
I'll applaud you.
exactly.
It has been so long since I got my master's. I don't remember.
Years?
Sorry,
A couple years.
at least.
Yeah.
I don't remember what is considered a full load per semester for
It-
graduate work.
It's at least 12.
Does that make a difference?
Colleges
If
can
you're
some-
working on a thesis or?
I'm sorry, most colleges consider 9 graduate credits a minimum of full-time student.
Okay,
It's not,
with,
no,
my
that's-
experience is different than that, Mr. Bomersky. It's,
Okay.
my experience is that it normally is at least 12. Anything under 12 is considered part-time.
But for.
That's
correct?
undergrad. Undergrad.
Graduate
I'm thinking,
work is usually
yeah.
different because it's more involved. Do you know? I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I know. you're
Mr. Williams,
you're
I think she's referring to Mr. Williams. You can.
12 for graduate, 9 for graduate. To be full,
Okay.
to
Right.
be full-time.
12 for undergrad.
I just,
You-
yep.
That's what I,
Yes.
that was the point I tried, because I thought that was actually
Yeah.
It-
correct.
and-
It's more, each class you take at the graduate level is theoretically a lot more work than what you do in the undergraduate level.
it varies by program. It's up to the program and the college to define it.
I mean, the ABA defines full-time status as 12 credits or more. And that generally tracks most universities' full-time, part-time thresholds. It also has to do with student loan eligibility and things like that. But look, we're way down in the weeds.
So I'm
but-
hearing
I mean,
15,
Let's keep on going.
I'm hearing 15 and 30.
So
is what
15
I
and
heard.
30? All right.
Well, at the end of the day, we've got to approve it. The superintendent's got to approve this, so I'm not sure we're getting maybe
still- you
more in the
still wanna-
weeds than we need to get.
You still want a
Don't want some
policy.
teeth
that's
in
gonna-
it, though.
You still want a policy that
Okay.
can hold its own. You don't want to have to make decisions on the fly and have a different decision for everybody.
So.
I do.
And we have to approve it anyway. If there's an exceptional circumstance, we can look at that on a case-by-case basis. So
Exactly.
with that change and barring any further comment, we'll move this to first reading.
I don't know, do we all, is there enough people that really feel that?
Oh, 15 and 30.
I feel like 15 is excessive.
Pardon me?
I feel like 15 is excessive, and I'm thinking of some situations, and I don't know the numbers, but say you have a teacher who is looking to move into, say, school counseling, and they're doing their graduate work, and then they need to do an internship block. Well, that internship block is basically full-time working, Can you give me any insight on something like that on?
Yeah, it would most likely be a 3-credit class. Typically it's spread over 2 semesters, and they're required to get a certain number of hours, for that internship. And most individuals do need to take a sabbatical when they get to that intern piece, because when you get to school counseling, school psychology, you actually have to go in and do all the testing and the groups counseling, things like that. And you can't do that before or after school or on a planning period. So the hours, I mean, administratively, it's 360 hours. And so you can work on that depending on your time. But when you start to look at, maybe Dr. Muster, I know we were talking about this, I can't remember off the top of my head. School counseling and school psychology require full semesters
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
internships,
Yeah.
as well as social work,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
And is that a 9-credit? Or is, like, how many credits would it? I just don't want to block somebody out, like
I
having
think for
something
some of
like.
them, yeah, some of them, it depends on how the credits are split between their internship and some of their other coursework or block
Right.
work, if you're
And
familiar with.
and those are positions that we have a hard time filling, so I wouldn't want to discourage people from being able to accomplish that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
those are
They are.
positions we have trouble filling.
Do any of these students do like research? Because I do remember being in grad school, I wasn't taking 15 credits because I was doing research. Do any of them do like research? Because you can't have as many credits if you're doing research. So I do think 15 and 30 seem on the high side for graduates.
They normally, if you're writing your dissertation, that counts for a big chunk of credits, I think. That's my recollection. Is that the dissertation process alone is,
No.
You get 1 or 2 credits.
Yeah,
in your
dissertations.
class.
It's a lot more time than the
It's-
credits.
it's-
That's why
It doesn't.
I'm worried about saying 15 and 30 is a minimum for graduate type work. It probably should be less, 12 or 20, 12 and 20. I don't know. I just know when I was in graduate school, and that's chemical engineering, a little bit different, but I wasn't taking 15 credits when I was doing my research.
I was getting dissertation credits of 1 on the semester.
Pardon me?
1 credit for dissertation writing. Now you had multiple sections of it, but it still wouldn't add up to near the minimum.
I'm going to date myself again, which I do all the time. When I was in graduate school, you did a thesis for your master's and a dissertation for your doctorate. Is that not still the case? And there's a difference then of what type of research you do and what's required. Is that still accurate?
Yeah. That's correct.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure it was more than 1 credit.
So what about coming somewhere in the middle
No, I did it all.
and doing 12 with a verbiage in there? There could exceptions be made for or extenuating circumstances or whatever, however you want to word it, but make it 12 and 24. Because there are some classes where you're not going to have a lot of counseling hours or things like that.
I just checked someone who's working on a dissertation. They get 1 credit per dissertation class.
Okay.
There goes line.
all right, but you wouldn't take a leave of absence to write the dissertation, would you? I mean, is that?
Some do.
Yeah, a lot of people, that's what they use the sabbatical for.
We still need to review them.
Mike, it's.
My company did this, we wouldn't get any work done.
That's what I have, because that's the minimum.
That kind of makes sense with the dissertation. And we gotta approve it anyway, so
Yes.
There just has to be there has to be like a certain level of prudence and vigilance when we go to approve
Yeah,
it,
I mean-
right? I mean, let's be honest.
I mean, Mike's gonna
Yeah.
review it, and if it's not
Gotta be careful
worthy,
what you're doing.
probably won't even bring it to the board.
I have to bring it.
I'll be, okay, if we're worried about 9 versus 12 or 15, and the argument is the dissertation, that's gonna impact whether it's 9, 12, or 15 credits.
Some of us
So
aren't
I'm
worried.
not sure if we're basing the argument around they have to write the dissertation, and that's only 1 credit, so they're not gonna be eligible, under this standard either.
Exactly. So some of us aren't worried about that,
So I
but we
think
know
that-
it will go
That's all
through.
their argument then. I mean, it's not,
What if we just put something, no less than 9 hours in others to be determined according to the
But I have it.
program?
That's down.
Right, the minimum requirement is 9 for a half
Okay.
semester.
I think it should be higher than that. I mean.
I disagree.
Yeah, I agree. It should be higher.
Depending on what degree, unless you're trying to go back and get certification in another area, but if you're going back to get a master's,
Say you have to take-
9 is what this, you said that's what Penn State requires?
In,
Supposed to be
in
one of the
the
best
world I live in,
degrees. I guess that's.
in the world I live in, and I'm just coming from my perspective, you don't get a sabbatical to figure out how to get your
Yeah.
advanced degrees, whether master's or doctorate. There is no sabbatical.
9 credits.
So I'm very insensitive to the concern around being able to take time off of work and get any pay to get an advanced degree. I just, it's not a world I live in.
Okay,
So I've heard 9, I've heard
12.
12 and
okay,
15, so.
all right. I think realistically, are we comfortable with 12 in lieu of 15, or do we want to say 15 and 30?
I'm fine with 9.
Okay, I think,
Are we gonna, I'm good with this. Maybe there's enough of us that are good with 9.
how many board members would like 12 or more? Okay, how many would like 9?
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So. Pardon me? Wait, was there 5 votes for 9?
I thought there was.
Charles raised his hand.
Okay, you only want 9?
Yeah.
And then, okay, then 9.
Okay, 9 it is.
All right.
Sometimes if we had 10 board members.
Ooh, actually,
Remember, that was a straw poll.
Right, but we need something to put in for first read. We can revisit this at first read.
At the end of the day.
That doesn't pass anything. It simply gives them direction for first reading.
Correct. I just want to make that clear for the record.
Somebody taking half pay to advance, that's a sacrifice.
We
you
still
know?
have to vote on this policy, so that's why I made it clear it was a straw poll. It didn't pass anything yet.
That's true.
So,
Thank you. That's all I have. Next policy.
all right, moving right along. 703 and 704 sanitary management and maintenance are just up for routine review. There are no recommended changes. Does anyone have any questions or comments about either of them? Seeing none, we'll move both of them to second reading. 815-1, artificial intelligence, Mr. Graham.
So this is the
That's-
actual draft policy that we discussed at last month's meeting. Most of the language in here is virtually the same as what was in the samples that were up on the screen last month. There's a couple things I'll highlight in here, and then this is not set for first reading. This is really just your first look at it, so that we can take it back and make any further adjustments. Couple things to highlight, as we discussed last month, we're specifically calling out the policy targeting generative AI versus just general tools to enhance software functionality. One of the items we did discuss was on student instruction of AI and fitting that in. We did add a line at the bottom of that paragraph stating that it should be, the AI instruction should be incorporated into existing lessons on technology, media literacy, research skills, and academic honesty, just because there was some concern around implementing that in a larger curriculum. The FERPA section, we didn't have in there, but most of that is just standard language similar to what we use with other tools. There was some discussion last month under academic honesty about what kind of the default would be, because we were debating whether it would be mandatory for all teachers to put something in to their syllabuses or things like that. So while we have the chart here, which we can go through if you'd like, one thing we did add in the very first column, basically saying either no AI use permitted or not otherwise defined by the teacher. We basically left it as AI can be used for brainstorming or, coming up with some ideas, but can't actually be used for generating content as kind of a base assumption that AI is out there. Students are going to use it in some form, but
It's not permitted to be used for content creation, which is what the other steps are, where teachers would be specifically defining that as being permissible as you work your way down through the chart there. The subsection, nope,
Question,
yeah.
how are we going to tell if they use AI or not is the loaded question.
Well, that would be a question whether you have the policy or not. I mean, that's something we've struggled with as it is right now. And Dr. Musser, I don't know if you, I mean, we're working with that. Kathy? You
I
have any
don't
other
want
comments?
to make a joke about it, but sometimes we will use AI to discover other AI. A lot of it's in some of the assignments and how we're creating some of the assignments. Some of it is, I know Kathy and I were in a meeting today talking about writing samples of students when you have student sample work, and then the work that is turned in is drastically different. There's a number of different ways to do it with students that are physically in your classroom, where the district's going to have to continue to evolve and learn like other districts is the online area. Because when you're fully online, I don't know if you've taken any, we had a rich college class conversation. I don't know if anyone's taken an online class recently, but some of them now you take in front of a camera and they have eye detection software. And if your eyes go off the screen for a period of time, you get a warning. And so many you get, it sounds, yep, but that's, yep, there you go. So the online area is something where we really do have to continue to work on, as we need to keep our online programming robust and keep our cyber dollars within our district. But as far as the internal classroom setting, I think we're pretty set up to start to engage in those conversations.
But now our students now that are writing reports for class, outside of class, we have no real way to tell if they're using AI, correct?
Well, some of it, again, going back to the similar sample work that we already have. I mean, if it's drastically different, a lot of it also is some of the reports, they can do their research outside, maybe they'll do some of their writing inside over a number of weeks. There's a couple of different ways to address some of those concerns.
Okay. It's going to add a lot of.
None of them foolproof.
This is a
It's,
big evolution, a lot of additional work.
it is. I hate to keep comparing it to the internet, but it really is that scary time when the internet came out and we thought we were, never going to recover again. We're going to recover. We're just going to have to fight our way through it.
And teachers are probably already working
Yeah.
through those and have been working through
Yeah.
those methods of figuring that out.
Yeah.
So just a quick, continue scanning through here. The last sections were the ones that I think we had the most discussion on, but there was not really a consensus. So the language here is still the same as what it was before, around the use of AI for assisting with grading, but not being the determining factor. That's still the teacher assigning it. And the same for use of AI use in operations to ensure fairness in hiring practices and things like that. There is still a professional development section at the bottom where we're talking about providing teachers with training on AI and its uses in the classroom. Nothing out of the ordinary there. We provide that now. And that brings us to the end of the policy.
And as Graham kind of highlighted when we started this presentation, we really are looking for anything that the board finds just totally unacceptable. We didn't want to bring anything to a first reading that was totally off the mark. We also know that this is a foreign topic and a new topic, and one that blows a lot of people's minds, including my own. So we wanted to put it in front of you in this format. We know there's a lot here to read and digest. So if you can provide any feedback, whether it's here tonight or even over the course of the next couple weeks, this is a policy. If it's close enough, we can bring it to a first reading in June. If it's not, we'll continue to work on it.
Mrs. Gravy?
I have a couple questions. First of all, what timeline are you looking to get this implemented in time for the beginning of the next school year? For the student handbooks?
It makes sense there. As far as the student handbooks, since they're electronic, we can make those adjustments pretty much whenever. But
Okay.
just from a logistical, it makes sense. But I also don't want to put bad policy in play that makes sense on another. I'd like to have a good policy go in when it goes in.
And then continuing on that same vein, it talks about incorporating this into the current curriculums. Where does that responsibility fall on whom, I guess, to design that AI learning if where are the teachers in learning it so that they can then implement it and all in a timely fashion in time for the start of school?
Yeah, so if you look back to our last presentation, we have been working pretty actively on the professional development of our staff. We haven't seen full integration in the classroom because we have been a little bit, I won't say behind, we've been very targeted with our policy. But I think once the policy is approved, I think you'll start to see more application in the classroom from teachers. It's also one of those topics that's going to be covered a little bit in a number of different areas, just like we have digital citizenship pieces and all those other areas, like when we're evaluating text. Just when, again, another internet analogy, and I'm sorry, when we're Googling things and we're evaluating the authenticity of the document and is Wikipedia a good source, and all those things can occur naturally in a couple of different classroom settings.
Additionally, like on top of that, though, my concern is consistency then. Because if I have a teacher who doesn't use AI and I'll use sixth grade as an example because it is kind of that bridge to getting older, then I'm not getting that. And if I do have a teacher that is active in using AI and trying things, then I do get it. So this doesn't define where that is happening and consistently across the district or age levels. And that concerns me.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and it's certainly something we can look to add, or it's something we can work in an administrative reg at some other time. But like
That's what
most,
I wanted-
yeah,
I said with the delegation.
yeah, I was looking over
wanted
your
to
shoulder.
be in the procedure part.
The only thing I'd throw out with that, generally, the other areas that are mentioned there, whether it's internet safety, digital citizenship, those aren't usually spelled out in board policy as far as what's at each grade level. That's usually worked way further down. The board policies on internet safety and everything simply say that we'll provide teaching or lessons on internet safety.
And I'm fine if you guys define that. I just want it to be
Well,
consistent. Like we know that digital citizenship happens, I know in elementary, in the library curriculum, I just don't want to talk about.
And we can certainly make revisions if it's something we do want to address in a policy later. But like most new things in education, once they're rolled out, you have to see how they play in the classroom. And if it's something where we got to up expectations or put something out to staff, it's something we can address in professional development too, to try to ensure that consistency.
So Tab, Doug, and Mike, this is something we had some presentation on, but does the board need some additional training on AI? Because I feel like it's such a new concept. Justin's shaking his head no. The IU talked last night that there's some opportunities where boards had retreats to learn more about AI. Is that something we want to eventually do?
I think PSBA might have some micro learning units on the PSBA website that we can try. And I think there was a summer certification class that's available. I was trying to find the dates on that again, just to see if it worked for me, but there are some.
It's just such a new concept, and I'm not sure we're anything close to being experts at it.
In
We're going to be making decisions on it.
In your defense, we've done 3 to 4 presentations. Within a month after each presentation, we were out of date. So that's just where we're at.
And Mike,
Mrs. Johnson?
I have a question about the professional development.
Sure.
Some of the trainings are required and I think have a must be completed by date. Is that true for AI training?
So we didn't have any of those discussions yet, but our PD calendar with all the required trainings that are mandated by the state, especially with Act 55 right now, are really putting a strain on our PD hours. There still are summer opportunities. There are teachers that engage in learning in their own for curiosity. The IU we were just at today is running a couple sessions of AI over the summer as well. So there's plenty of opportunities there, but I think some of the AI training will have to take place in some faculty meetings and some other maybe more building specific venues.
Mike Bromersky, you were going to say something before Linda.
So Mrs. Brady is correct. PSBA is doing things around AI in terms of some symposiums, some learning options. One piece that I saw, it's the fall of 25. I didn't see a specific date. I didn't log into PSBA, but we can do that, and I'll put information in board news when I find things so that you can see kind of where that is. You have the ability to log into PSBA as well to check those out. I think the other part when it comes to AI, it requires people to take a risk. It requires people to try and see what's there and then go and validate the information that you're getting or what you're kind of looking to use. I think it's also a piece to think about, I want to be able to do X. Is there something out there that can help me in an AI world, and then kind of search for that? So for example, we've been talking about the McGrath training with regards to bullying and harassment, things like that, trying to find ways to update or modernize some of their videos. And Dr. Musser's been working with them on taking the content and putting it into an AI movie generator to make it more real, in a sense, for students, not necessarily as cartoon or juvenile, which you might see at a middle level, like just for our high school students, kind of see that difference. Like, will that work? Can we try it? And so we're testing some of those things. So it just requires a little trial and error just to see. And then when you do something, then we need you to share it. And we need you to share what you learned, how you did it, what were the pros and the cons, and things that people need to be mindful of the pitfalls, or don't do this, but I would do this. And that's how we're going to spread kind of that learning. But Dr. Musser's right. Like, once you try something with one thing, there are so many more things that are out there that are new. So I'm hesitant to say it's got to be X, because whatever that X is going to go away very quickly, because something's going to come out and then we're always going to be behind. I think it's more mindful in my mind to think about, what do we think for our student standpoint? What's appropriate for them at the age level in that exploration stage versus the teaching stage versus the we're not going to even touch it stage.
I think an important point too, like I think you said the pitfalls, and there will be
There will
pitfalls,
be.
and we have to have grace around those pitfalls because we don't know what to expect. So we have to figure it out as we go.
I mean, if you Google something now, the first thing you see is the AI overview. It doesn't necessarily mean that that AI overview is correct. You have to dig further, and it's good as a starting point, but then you use it to validate by going into other sources to say, okay, yes. And there are people who are starting to develop their own chat GPT style pieces. There's something that, Mr. Graham has showed us, that we can put documents into Notebook LM. And you can then start asking it questions, and then you can work to refine it and kind of help get it kind of honed in so that it's accurate. But it can take massive documents and then kind of analyze or synthesize all that information and give you what you want without having to actually look at it. But in the early stages, you are going to have to look at it. You are going to have to read it to make sure it's correct and dig further. So
When I was talking about training, I wasn't talking about us to become experts. I'm more concerned about what's the overall educational impact. We've gotten bits and pieces, but what should we understand about AI as a board so we can make correct decisions, good decisions?
I think it would be great to attend. I think each one, there's something new to present and see, but my assessment is you will never be comfortable with how fast AI is moving. So it is one of those things I know I can get pretty ambitious on some things and try to push things through. We've been on this for 3 or 4 years now. We are not on the cutting edge of it. Like, we are being very prudent in how we're proceeding. But I don't think I'm going to ever get everyone comfortable around the table in AI, including myself. So that's why we try to have a start base policy here that we can always bring back and revise as we need, because this is not static.
I think it's a good starting point.
I have, any other comments? I have a couple.
You go ahead. I have one just comment, might be the same. I don't know if it's the same one, but go ahead.
Okay,
You've been
thank you.
silent.
I think that under the sort of stoplight analysis, the chart that Mr. Graham put up, I continue to be concerned with providing a notice defense to plagiarism, and this still provides a notice defense. I think that's easily fixed if we strike the having received such notice from a teacher and just say any student who violates these standards. That probably eliminates that. I also would suggest that we not require the faculty to, before every assignment, to talk about AI. I think the default should be, in the absence of specific authorization, you may not use AI.
I agree. I agree. I worried about that with how
Yeah.
specific that's not.
So if the faculty wishes to authorize the use of AI, they may do so. But in the absence of that specific authorization, the default is that AI is not permitted.
Just to give you some insight on that, that is the reason in the first column here, we did put or not otherwise defined by the teacher.
Yeah.
And it kind of got broken up by the page break here, but.
Oh,
the-
or not, okay, got it.
Yeah, or not otherwise defined by the teacher. And in that section, it's either the assignment's completed independently without the assistance of AI, or AI is used for brainstorming and generating ideas only.
Yeah.
And that was the catch-all that
Yeah.
if it's never discussed, the assumption is that you could use AI for brainstorming,
Of course.
but not for actually completing.
Any
the assignment.
substantive part of the assignment.
And it, like I said, it kind of got destroyed by the page break there, but that was the idea behind that because again, AI is basically filtering into every product that is out there. And it may just be, give me some ideas on good topics for a 5-paragraph essay. I'm just throwing that out there, but it's going to be tough to say you cannot use AI for anything when it's
No.
baked into literally.
What you're saying addresses my concern.
Okay.
So the only thing I would say, I would make 2 technical changes then. I would suggest in the paragraph under, the second paragraph under academic honesty, I would say it is the responsibility of all teachers to provide students notice if AI can be used. Okay? Not of how, because this is the way that sort of presumes that it can be. Then I think the chart is good, and then I would get rid of the notice defense down at the bottom.
I actually agree with Grant on that how and if, because the how makes it seem like you do have to present it before every assignment or
Yeah.
project that.
And then my second concern is under the administrative use of it, or for, I'm sorry, for grading. I would like to say that the substantial work of grading should be done by the faculty. If there's some way that AI can streamline mundane bureaucratic aspects of it, that's fine, but I'd like it to make clear that the substantial work of grading should be done under the professional judgment of each faculty member and not delegated to AI.
Like the Scantron example you use, Scantron, things like that, they're simple scannings of
Yeah.
checks and things like that. Some of our learning management systems can already do some of that work. That you'd be comfortable with, but you'd like to strengthen
Yeah.
the grading statement.
Yeah. In other words, I'm not saying don't use it. I'm sure
Right.
there are ways it
Like-
can be used to
right.
make the process more efficient, but I want to just find a way to telegraph that the essence of grading, that is a subjective assessment of the student's work product, should be a human function.
So the writing of an essay, you wouldn't use AI to judge that and give it a grade.
That would be my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'd like to know more about how teachers maybe are using that. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the only concerns that I would have. Mr. Walker, I think you had.
Mine is a little bit different under professional development, and this might be splitting hairs, but the board directs the superintendent designee to provide regular professional development training for administrators, teachers, and it goes on and on. I would love to see that be much more generic. I think I don't want to set us up for specific things that require training and extra days out of the classroom. I mean, I understand some people are scared of AI, but AI is already being used when you do a Google search. I mean, I don't know what there is to be afraid of other than if it's used for malicious behavior, which it is. That's the fear of AI. The use of it isn't the problem. It's the people using it that are the issue. So I'd just like to see that soften and be a lot more generic because it's regular professional development. What does that mean? Somebody's going to say, well, I need 20 sessions on AI. And the next person's going to say, I don't need any. And it just becomes I think it could become a problem, especially with the bargaining agreement. So I don't want to create any more problems. I don't want Mr. Vomersky to hire 6 more people to train people on AI. I'm not interested.
Just a question there. If you look at that paragraph, does the second sentence cover it all? It just says training should. It doesn't say
Yes.
how much, how often.
It does.
Like, I think it covers the essence of it.
It does.
Yeah, because.
And I think it doesn't lock us into anything specific that could get awkward.
Yeah, because the 3 items up there, data privacy, legal compliance, and ethical considerations are certainly, I think, our biggest concerns with professional development with training.
It's okay, but it doesn't need to be said. It's just, that's part for the course. Doesn't need to be in a policy.
I think that this concern could be addressed. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Walkermuth. I agree with what I think where you're going with this. I think we can soften it by saying the district may provide regular professional development, may provide, and then say such training should equip. Instead of saying like, no, you have to do this. Frankly, that's for the superintendent to decide what training is needed.
I could live with that, but get rid of the regular because the regular is, what's regular to me might not be regular to you.
Yeah.
It's very subjective. Just take it out.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question, which I don't know if this is the right time to ask it or not. Knowing that AI is already used in many professions by college graduates, for example. We are sending kids, many of our students they're college bound. So, or wherever they're bound. And does this policy allow, do we know how we're going to train them? I'm so that they know how to use it, so they don't go to college and all of a sudden they get an F because they wrote a paper wrong, or because they turn in an engineering paper to their supervisor and the supervisor looks at it and goes, too much AI, go back and do the work. Are we preparing them for that with this, or is that something that will be taken care of as classes are being done, or?
For me, it's the intent of and I don't mean to be simplistic, it's the intent of the entire policy to start to open up those conversations for kids, that it's not a cheating in the background, but a tool and how you use that tool. That's really the essence behind the policy for us, because again, it's used in the workplace and it will be their tool of the future. And we are still training people for jobs that don't exist yet. So I think that's all part of it. But I also am not arrogant enough to think that we're going to hit something out of the park on a policy so new and so wild as AI right off the bat. So we can revise it as often as we want to get what we need at the end of the day.
And I don't know what is needed. I just know.
I don't know what is needed.
Kids work in IT and engineering, and they tell me stories, actually. So I'm thinking our seniors, hopefully, they'll know how to use it responsibly when they're in college, and most certainly when they are in their profession working.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will know until we get a policy in place and we start to get some of the cases where it was used inappropriately, where we address this way, where we start to see good examples of how it's used in the classroom that others can replicate in other subjects. I think that's where the real growth, when we put all our heads together, I think that's where that's going to come from. That's certainly the goal. I just don't want to have a policy that gets in the way of it, but if it is a policy that is too open, we can always clamp down a little bit moving forward.
Yeah, I know how it all works.
Yeah, and again, just full.
Concerned with our kids when they leave here, do they know how to use it responsibly? Have we, has that been taught to them?
Yeah, the difficulty is right now, all based on everything I've seen at conferences and online things, for the last year, every K-12 district is wrestling with that exact same question. There's not an answer at this point to how you effectively prepare kids with AI, because it's
So maybe the kindergartners will have a good handle on it when they graduate.
perhaps, yes, one would hope.
Hopefully. All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments about 815-1?
One last thing. I know it's big. I know you're going to have other conversations, people snagging in the supermarket. We are going to look to try to bring a first reading back, but please email Graham or myself if you have any thoughts, any other changes, things that you think about, or if you want to see something, feel free to reach out to one of us.
Thank you. Just a real quick announcement. Mrs. Eshelman, would you like to quickly update the board on fair funding resolution, the work that's been done on that, and next steps?
I think it's going to come at the next Building and Grounds and Finance Committee meeting.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah.
And that I think.
And it will be available to the board like normal with any changes that have been made.
Pardon me?
It'll be available to the board just like normal with any changes that have
Yeah.
been made, correct?
Can you share those changes?
Yeah, I believe, yeah, Mrs. Eshelman?
I don't have them in front of me.
I think they were the ones that were discussed, is my understanding.
I think they'll officially be in board docs. I don't have it in
Who's
front of me.
working,
so-
who's working on the changes?
Yeah. So Mrs. Eshelman and I met this morning briefly and looked through the resolution and made the changes that seemed to be the consensus of the board at the last meeting. Those changes will be available in board docs when that agenda goes live. It was simply redacting the first part of that sentence in the penultimate paragraph of the resolution. So I think based on the conversation the last time, the board should hopefully be agreeable with what comes back.
So it's gonna be on the agenda
For
for the next,
yes,
for the building and
yes.
Yeah.
that next meeting.
It's not, is it next Tuesday or the following? I think it's the following Tuesday. Everybody keeps saying next Tuesday, but I believe it's 2 weeks from now.
The following Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah,
May 27th.
Okay.
12 days.
All right. Anything else? Right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Maris, second. Second by Mr. Wagner. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.